Yeah, very special good morning to you as we wind down into December with Elvis President. Elvis, you getting a holiday feeling it?
It's almost there, week and a half to go, so we're almost there.
Yeah, the whole of South Africa, of course, winds down in what we call December here in South Africa. Of course, there's no let up for the SABC as the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee hearing into affairs at the National Broadcaster continues today on this very show. Of course, we've been running a poll for the last 24 hours. Just want to give you the final outcome of that poll, Elvis. Are you following the SABC board inquiry? And people are following it no end. 236 people voted. 85% say, yeah, we're glued to the TV set.
The 15% are the people still working in this country. Yeah, the rest of the people are following it. There you go.
Tabo Joy. Yes, I'm following it until Friday. I think it ends tomorrow, to be honest, and it will resume in January.
Now, Inner says, yes, I'm glued to the couch from 9:30 until 9 o'clock at night. Am I one in a million of 27% unemployed? Kaloka Ku.
Nutty says, Vuyo Mvoko delivered the most damaging punches as a witness, he says Nutty Tete.
This one from Victor Zwan, he says, yes, and all thanks to the SABC News online channel. Now, that's a channel we've got that people can follow us 24/7, right? For the broadcast and clear picture, I'm 200% behind the SABC 8, the SABC Inquiry, says Victor Zwan, eh?
Savannah says, best thing on TV, I'm always watching TV like a hawk. It's interesting, the whole of the country is watching both the SABC and, of course, what you're seeing in Parliament, like hawks. Right now, we're also asking you a question today. The question, send us some tweet. What do you make of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee hearing into the SABC's affairs thus far? So far, it's been lots and lots of things happening. What do you make of it? Send us what you think about what is happening in Parliament at SABC Newsroom. But there's a whole lot of other news happening. Elvis is standing by to get us going.
The Communications Minister, Faith Mutambi, is scheduled to testify before the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC this afternoon. The Independent Police Directorate head, Robert McBride, says a slew of serious criminal charges against him are baseless and will collapse like the Zimbabwe rendition case. And in international news, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says an evacuation of rebel-held areas of eastern Aleppo has been delayed for reasons that are not clear, holding up the implementation of an agreement to restore government control over the area. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Gentlemen, we're coming to the end of the year, but there's still a whole lot going on in the field of sports. A lot of interesting results coming in of last night. Some great footballing action.
And of course, not forgetting Pirates, right?
Not forgetting Orlando Pirates.
The greatest team in South Africa, Orlando Pirates, unfortunately were defeated by minnows last night.
You know what, even trying to take the sting out of the disappointment of his team losing last night. But good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Just days after earning Cup glory, Telkom Cup champions Cape Town City FC gets thrashed 4-0 in Athlone by struggling Platinum Stars.
Here's another chance for Bena. One-on-one with the keeper. Makes it 4. Barkley again. Little higher. Header down and in. Ashley Williams. First goal for Everton.
And Everton break Arsenal's unbeaten run and deny them a chance to close the gap to log leaders Chelsea by beating them 2-1 at Goodison Park. And Torneos y Competencias, an Argentine sports media company, buys itself out of trouble with a $113 million payment and the wide-ranging bribery probe involving FIFA. All this and more we've got for you, obviously, if we were going to be going through to do sports. But for now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour, the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC affairs have heard now how corporate governance and procurement policies were flouted at the public broadcaster in transactions involving millions of rands. It also heard another board member was booted out by the Communications Minister, Faith Mutambi.
Professor Bongani Khumalo testified that he was harassed by Communications Minister Faith Mutambi after he voted against Claudi Mutsueneng being appointed COO. He says he was later forced to quit after he received a letter from Mutambi.
The letter that I received said I had to state reasons why it should not be recommended, she should not recommend to the president that I be removed from the board. It was the strangest thing ever to occur to me. In all my corporate life, I had never been faced with a situation such as that.
Another witness was former head of procurement.
I think everyone knows about it, it was in the public domain, was the acquisition of the studio. The studio also didn't follow procurement due process. It was irregularly awarded to the service to the supplier/vendor without my knowledge as the head of procurement. We're talking about a transaction of plus minus 43 million here, which was done outside procurement. And this happened after the DEF delegation of authority was amended, giving powers to the directors. And when I realized, actually when this was brought to my attention, I took it upon myself to question the GM in charge, including the GE, about this process. And I also highlighted the irregularities about this particular transaction and informed them that when it comes to my desk, I won't attach my signature on this one.
Shushu also told the inquiry that he had picked up a litany of questionable transactions amounting to millions of rand. Shushu said he reported the matter to the Office of the Auditor General as well as National Treasury. Also before the committee was the SABC Company Secretary, Theresa Geldenhuys.
Are you a director of a company along with Mr. Motsoeneng called Rugby Broadcasting?
Geldenhuys said the company was dormant.
We've been struggling to get this company deregistered for 3 years now, after the approval obtained by the Minister of the Communication and the Minister of the National Treasury, which is the process that has to be followed in terms of the PFMA. So I am the company secretary. Mr. Motsoeneng at the time was the only director of that. It's a dormant company which is supposed to have been closed or deregistered by SABC.
The chairperson of the SABC board, Professor Obed Maguve, has finally relented and appeared before the inquiry after he was summoned by Parliament following his dramatic walk out of the inquiry last week with his delegation. Vuyani Green, SABC News, Parliament.
The SABC board chairperson, Mbeleheni Magube, says that he's decided to use legal representation as the sole remaining member of the board because he believes he's entitled to it. Magube faced critical questions by the ad hoc committee members about the fact that attorneys were instructed to act on behalf of the board and the SABC when the board did not have a quorum to effect such a decision.
You know, Prof, I was one of the people you went to court about to remove from this committee because you thought I'd be biased against you and I'd been mean to you or whatever it was. I came here today with an open mind. I wanted to hear you defend yourself and assure us that you've done your very best, but you have not done that, with all due respect, sir. Every question, I am not aware, I wasn't there, I don't know, or you change your position and you mislead this committee. What on earth have you been doing as the chairperson of the SABC board? And why on earth should we keep you on that board if you do not know any of the major issues facing the SABC? Why must the public continue to pay you a salary for that job?
Yeah, I will respond to what I've done. Because I said, the last part of your question, I said, Parliament is the appointing authority, if I'm not mistaken, or would recommend to the appointing authority to terminate my services. That is what I've said. But what I've done, and I will say this with pride, under my leadership, the number of qualifications that we received from the Auditor General were drastically reduced. To me, we had an SABC that was stable financially, and we also, on a piloting basis, introduced new channels so that when we migrate to DTT, we are sentient of the challenges and other things. For us, it's a learning curve. So it's a lot that we have achieved under my leadership, but I cannot respond to the issue of why you cannot dismiss me. That I don't have an answer to. And I've also given answers to various things. Unless if, Honorable Van Dam, you expected me to lie. I didn't do so. And if I say some of the things I can't remember, I cannot remember. I was listening to other witnesses giving evidence here. There are things that they forgot.
Well, we'll be crossing live to the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee to continue with the proceedings there. But the long weekend is around the corner, and I know you're looking forward to it. Roads into and out of Gauteng province may swell with traffic volumes. You are warned. This morning, traffic and police officials are out in full force enforcing the law on some major routes. Now, for some of this and other news, we are joined in studio by the Deputy Director and Spokesperson for the Gauteng Traffic Police, Busaphi Nxumalo. Mr. Nxumalo, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Sen. Thank you.
Now, Deputy Director, we understand that the Gauteng Premier as well as the MEC for Safety and Security have all joined forces with the police officials in a very massive roadblock. You want to tell us more about that and why is that important?
Yeah, remember the mandate of Gauteng Traffic Police is to make sure that Gauteng remains a safe and a secure province, and people that are residing in it are feeling safe during this festive season or during the peak season. Mm-hmm. So the Premier and obviously our MEC Umama Usizagele Nkosi Malobane, they attended to one of the Haslock areas in the province, N12, just between Soweto and Zirwecom. That stretch of the road, more pedestrians are dying there. So that is the reason why we had to zoom into that place, and just to make sure and sensitize all the people that are residing, around there, that they are dying, and also just to check, more especially the roadworthiness of vehicles. More vehicles are not roadworthy on our roads, and more accidents have happened on that stretch of the road. So yes, we are mainly zooming on the Haslock areas that we are having in the province, unlike deploying officers all over the province. So at the moment we are dealing with top 5 Haslock areas in the province. That is why the Premier is there, and also they are moving they are doing door to door, trying to talk to the residents to tell them it's not safe to cross the freeway. And according to National Road Traffic Act 93 of 1996, there is no person that is supposed to be walking on the freeway or just moving. So most people, they cross there and they're drinking and walking. So that is jaywalking. So it is a serious challenge, more especially on that stretch of the road. So that is the reason why we mainly went there to do our operation.
I'm going to come back to jaywalking and so forth, and people walking on the highways and so forth. But this particular roadblock, why are you doing these roadblocks and what are you looking for?
We are looking for unroadworthy vehicles. We are looking for drivers who are not fit to convey passengers or to drive on our roads, because more drivers, they don't have PRTP, they don't have proper documents, that are expected to be, and the vehicles still, they are not roadworthy. People are still drinking and driving. So those are the main things that we're concentrating on, more especially on public transportation. Most vehicles are not roadworthy. The drivers, they just drive as they wish. So it is, but remember, in Gauteng, our challenge is pedestrians. So this festive season, we are concentrating on pedestrians more pedestrians that are dying on our roads. 60%, and it's more than 60% of pedestrians contribute on our fatalities. Yes, we've managed to reduce the accident in the province, but unfortunately, the pedestrians, we've gone up, and it is a serious challenge. So this festive season, we are mainly, not that we are not concentrating on the other contributory factors, but yes, pedestrians are the most dying on our roads this festive season and throughout.
Just briefly explain to us your safety and security plans for the rest of the season.
We're going to have more operations, visibility. We're concentrating on visibility, more, we don't want we don't want to have more roadblocks. K78, no, it didn't yield results and it doesn't make an impact, proper impact that we are looking. So when we went back to see why are people dying, what went wrong, so we decided to go back to the drawing board. We mainly gonna concentrate on pedestrian fatalities, which is going to make sure that we deploy our officers all over the freeways, concentrating on pedestrians. We've got patrollers, we've got road safety education that is busy educating our pedestrians. We've got drinking and driving operations that are going to that are going to continue throughout the festive season. And also, yes, speeding. People are still driving in an excessive speed. So those are the three main contributory factors. Not K78, but yes, we are still going to make sure that our roads are, we are full, we are deployed, and making sure that our people are safe.
Any specific focus on Moloto Road, which is a very dangerous road, number of people down that particular road?
We've managed to control Moloto Road. Moloto Road, we've deployed officers 24/7. They are there. This year we didn't have more than 20 people dying on Moloto Road, but more especially the buses. We mainly concentrate on the buses. Patco buses, they're traveling, from Mpumalanga to Gauteng to Mpumalanga on daily basis. So we've managed to control. We've not yet recorded, more accidents on major accidents at Moloto Road. As far as I am concerned, we are happy at the moment the way Moloto Road is continuing. Yeah.
Now, crime is usually on the increase this time of the year. What is your safety tips for residents of Gauteng?
People must report crime. They must report anything that they see. If you're suspicious, maybe hijackings or all those, people, they must just report. They must be vigilant, more especially when you're driving at night or whenever, you just need to be vigilant. But to the criminals, I just want to say we are out there trying to make sure that our people feel safe. We don't want to, they always say Gauteng is a gangster's paradise. It is going to stop. This morning on our roadblock, we arrested a van that was full of Dacha this morning. So those suspects have been taken to Pegastal, SAPS, and obviously the law is going to take its course. But we say to our communities, please report crime and make sure that you take care of your life. Otherwise, Gauteng asipenywa asubambu mshini siyabopa.
Madam, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here. Now that was the Deputy Director and Spokesperson for the Gauteng Traffic Police, Busapi Ngumalo. Let's now go to Yeben, who is looking at Parliament.
Yeah, obviously, indeed we are. I think the whole nation's looking at Parliament. I can tell you Vincent Smith is just busy doing a little bit of housekeeping before matters get underway. Of course, Communications Minister Faith Mutambi, as you can see, well, she's scheduled to testify before the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC this afternoon. We expect her to be in the hot seat at around 2 o'clock today. Right to Know campaign, they will start proceedings this morning while they're busy clearing the floor to get matters underway. Let's take a look at some of your tweets beforehand. This one from Unati. He says, I'm glad that some people came forward with evidence. Even those are hiding must come forward, says Unati. Secular Singularity says, Newsroom, Parliament gave the SABC chair his orientation into the SABC. Is this not done when you start, not at the end? Maria de Conceição says, Newsroom, wow, I'm amazed by the intelligence of the ADIC committee, and it's an example for African countries. Accountability, that is, says Maria. Singularity comes back and says, Newsroom, SABC to transmit more of the inquiry on TV and on radios, give full exposure as it is newsworthy. I don't know where you've been, but we've been on it 24/7. Yes, this is the Newsroom show. This is where you come to have a look at the very latest in and around the world of news. But, of course, Vincent Smith is now on. Let's go to Parliament, where he is presiding today.
I regard that as an assault on Parliament. We want to reiterate our call to the agencies that are capable and set up to please assist in ensuring that all before this committee and indeed any other committee of Parliament are safe to do so, feel safe to do so, and that certainly Parliament must with one voice condemn any effort to subvert oversight, to subvert the deepening of democracy. And we can only appeal to those that are continuing to intimidate any witness to cease with what it is that they are doing. I thought we must bring that to your attention, honourable members. I'm not sure if you're aware or it has been brought to your attention, but it was brought to my attention very late yesterday that this is in fact what has happened. Having said that, we can continue the business of the day. I note you, Honourable Kwankwa, and then, all right, Kwankwa, Swartz, Matlangu, everybody, okay, that's fine. Can we start then with Kwankwa and then go to you, Ma'am Khoza, come down to Swartz, Matlangu, Ma'am Van Dam, Loliwe, and we'll end with you, Honourable Chauke. Is that in order? 1 minute, please, because we are really running late.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Indeed, we agree with you that this is an assault on Parliament. An assault on Parliament is an assault on our democratic dispensation, on our democracy as a country. And we want, as the United Democratic Movement, to take this opportunity to condemn these acts in the strongest possible terms. In fact, Chairperson, one of the journalists actually shared the text message with me, which was sent to them, and I would like to read it to this meeting and to the people of South Africa. It says, "Traitors, protecting your white friends in Parliament who started this, telling lies about your comrades. You were warned, we don't kill blacks, but sit and watch the blood flow." Now, we can't have that. We can't have a situation where Parliament is trying to get to the root cause of problems and trying to play its oversight role, and people who come here are intimidated and death threats are issued willy-nilly. We agree with you in saying, as I conclude, Chairperson, that we should urge the executive authority of Parliament to do everything in its power to try and make sure that we arrest this problem and deal with it and find a solution. And if need be, get to the point where we're even able to provide protection as a decision that can be made by them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. From the ACD. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Chair, the African National Congress is there to ensure that the democracy in this country is defended at all costs. And anyone who is trying to intimidate our witnesses and people who are trying to assist this country to move forward is actually militating in a total onslaught against the people of this country. And we are aligning ourselves with you, Chairperson, by calling on the agencies to act immediately on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. From the ACDP side, we also fully align ourselves with you, Chairperson. We find this totally outrageous. We share your sentiment that to intimidate any witness coming to Parliament is an affront and an attack on us as an institution. Bearing in mind, these are not frivolous threats. The evidence before this committee is that a shot or shots were already fired at one of the journalists. We need to take this very seriously. And I'm appreciative of the fact that you are reporting it to the authorities of Parliament. We need to ensure that this does not happen and that witnesses are not intimidated. I cannot stress that enough from our perspective, that it's time that we upheld protection for our witnesses so that no one would be intimidated when they stand up. We've got the Witness Protection, we've got the Protected Disclosures Act, but this is an affront not only on Parliament but on our rule of law. So I fully support your sentiments, Chairperson. Thank you.
Chair, I align myself with the sentiments already expressed by colleagues. My view is that as much as you have made a call, as much as you will be calling upon the authorities of Parliament, it is appropriate that on behalf of this committee, the ad hoc committee, that you personally raise the matter with the relevant authorities, especially the organized crime, and that you must be kept posted about the developments on the matter as chairperson, because our process-wise, we may adjourn tomorrow for a shorter season, reconvening next year. We are still continuing with our work, and therefore, those kind of threats may actually even affect some of the work that we need to do. So we need to put our foot down. It shall not be allowed. It is indeed a threat to the 55 million South Africans, and we must bring a stop to that kind of behavior. But yesterday, we raised the issue with the chairperson of the board, and he said he does not know nothing. So it means SABC does not care about, or the leadership of SABC does not care about what happens to the people in that institution, which is a serious problem.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with what everybody else has said. This matter has been reported to SAPS. The SABC 8 reported it. We reported it as well. I mean, it's been going on for months, and it shouldn't be rocket science to find out where these threats are coming from. They can trace cell phone numbers. I mean, everyone knows, everyone can tell where the threats are coming from. So can we please request an update from SAPS? How far with the investigation? Is arrest imminent? Why not? Chair, can we request that? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, we want to remind whoever is responsible for these threats that South Africa has a constitution and everybody is allowed to voice his or her views. Hands off everybody who has come to witness here, because we are trying to make sure that South Africa lives to her constitution. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. I just want to encourage you, Chair, to continue engaging with and the authority will be our National Police Commissioner, and especially when colleague says that a criminal case already has been opened and all of that. So I think it's important, in the best interest of our work, you continue doing that work. And the good thing is to have raised this thing again publicly, Chair. I want to commend you for that. But let's engage the authority, as you are mandated by the committee, to engage with the National Police Commissioner on this matter. Thank you.
Mr. Reddy, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry. Notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or a committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. I have been informed, sir, that you have agreed to take affirmation, so please repeat after me. I solemnly and sincerely declare.
I solemnly and sincerely declare.
And affirm that the evidence.
And affirm that the evidence.
I shall give.
I shall give.
Will be the truth.
Will be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Raise your hand. Oh, it's not raise your hand. Just say, I so affirm.
I so affirm.
Thank you very much. It is 9:30. Honorable Advocate Vanara, can we agree that between you and our visitors, you conclude your business at the latest by 10 o'clock? Thereafter, we will open it up to members for engagement. Is that okay with you, sir?
That's perfectly fine, sir. Mr. Reddy, I am not going to be leading you. I just want you to explain to the committee what the right to know represents and who the organization is. What are the issues that you took up with the SABC? And where did that process end? You've got less than 30 minutes to do that.
Thank you, Advocate Vanara. I have a statement prepared, but I will be omitting sections of it in the interests of time. On behalf of the Right to Know campaign, I would like to thank the committee for its work and for calling Right to Know to make an input. I make this statement in my capacity as a member of the Right to Know campaign. Until November 2016, I was an employee of the Right to Know, working as organizer for media freedom and diversity. In that capacity, I was responsible for the campaigns, for coordinating the campaign's work on the SABC. The events that I describe, however, are the subject of a concerted effort and concerted energies of many people, rather than just me as an individual. The Right to Know campaign was launched in 2010. We're a coalition of progressive organizations and activists across South Africa. We deal with a wide range of issues on information access, secrecy, surveillance, media and communication rights, and freedom of expression. And I should emphasize that the Right to Know campaign comprises a diverse range of members, stakeholders, cutting across divides of geography, class, language, race, age, gender, and ideological boundaries. I'd like to speak briefly on Right to Know's interest in public broadcasting. There is more detail in the statement. I'm going to leave out a significant section that is contained in the statement in the interests of time. But it goes without saying that as a public broadcaster, distinct from a state broadcaster, the SABC is bound by law to inform the public in a politically non-partisan manner and deliver news that is fair, accurate, and captures matters that are of the public interest. The committee no doubt appreciates that the importance of public broadcasting in South Africa is further heightened by the vast inequality that continues to define our country, and which is reproduced not only in material terms, but also in terms of access to information and the media. While wealthy urban South Africans have a wide range of media available to them on a variety of traditional and high-tech platforms, people in poor and rural areas rely primarily on public broadcasting to meet their information needs. Indeed, within the Right to Know, within our structures, both types of consumers are represented. It is in this context that R2K has been fighting for a more robust, better funded, and more independent public broadcaster. A broadcaster that puts the interests of the public first, that can promote a plurality of views, and which produces hard-hitting news and journalism that is able to expose corruption, abuses of power, and wrongdoing. The events described in this statement followed a period of years of instability and concerning developments at the SABC, including top-down political interference and editorial censorship, a growing climate of fear and self-censorship, within the broadcaster, as well as serious financial mismanagement and compromised governance. In May 2016, the SABC issued a statement to announce a unilateral prohibition on footage and coverage of violence at protests on the airwaves, what we'll refer to as the protest ban. This sparked a public outcry, and the Right to Know was one of those first to respond, issuing a statement on 28th of May 2016 to condemn the decision as an unjustifiable act of self-censorship. We said that this was intended, this protest ban, was intended to silence stories and images that those in power would find embarrassing. In our analysis, the protest ban was the same policy pursued by the SABC in the face of civil unrest during the struggle against apartheid, footage of which was also banned from television and radio reports. It seemed clear that the ban was part of a range of editorial changes that had been made to shape a certain narrative in the news media in the lead up to municipal elections. It is worth noting that the absurdity of the protest ban became clear shortly afterwards when Tshwane erupted in waves of violent protest. It was a leading national news story, yet SABC cameras looked away. It was a clear case where the SABC had disregarded basic editorial codes and was in flagrant violation of its mandate as a public broadcaster to ensure a high standard of accuracy, fairness, and impartiality in news and programs that deal with matters of public interest. The crisis at the SABC was already on the Right to Know campaign agenda, but these events precipitated a renewed focus. The issue was tabled and discussed at the June Provincial Working Group meeting of the Right to Know in Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN. Members of various grassroots organizations that make up the Right to Know provincial structures expressed serious alarm by the decision of the SABC to censor protests. These members and organizations, which include, for instance, the Thembelihle Crisis Committee, Makause, Gugulethu Backyarders, there are too many to list here, operating in solidarity with like-minded progressive organizations and fighting for a more equal, more open and democratic South Africa, represent economically marginalized working-class communities across the country. Members have a twofold interest in the matter of censorship. Firstly, they have an inherent interest in how protests and mass action are covered by the public broadcaster. Secondly, they are by and large consumers of SABC media. And of course, as Right to Know, we have a very strong mandate to focus on issues of media freedom and diversity, and we rely on the public broadcaster for our own communication needs. The events leading to the suspension of the journalists. On 20th of June 2016, Right to Know held a protest gathering at the SABC's offices in Auckland Park. This was in response to the protest ban. It was the first of many such actions, but it bears noting because it appears to have set in motion a chain of events that precipitated widespread protests against the SABC COO, then COO, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, his allies, and the board, or his allies on the board, and his political backers. The Right to Know protest was a peaceful picket outside SABC offices in Auckland Park. The event was properly organized in terms of the law, but later events suggest it was prohibited in terms of the SABC's arbitrary protest ban. Shortly after that, the news media reported that several SABC journalists, the first of those who would become known as the SABC 8, had been suspended after they disagreed with an instruction during a diary conference not to cover the Right to Know protest. Those were economics editor Tandeka Gilbule, RS Gia executive producer Fute Krige, and senior journalist Suna Venter. This development escalated the public alarm and set off further events. In the coming days and weeks, several other SABC journalists came to the defense of their suspended colleagues and journalist integrity more broadly. As the committee will know, in total 8 SABC journalists were suspended and later fired under completely unlawful circumstances. 7 of whom the broadcaster later reinstated with no further explanation. This led to further protest action at the SABC, the decision that our protest on the 20th of June should not be covered. During this time, a grouping of concerned organizations and people started to work together intensively to provide a unified response to the growing crisis at the SABC. Among those were the Right to Know, the SOS Coalition, unions such as the Broadcasting, Electronic Media and Allied Workers Union, BEMAU, and the Media Workers Association of South Africa and Media Monitoring Africa, as well as various civil society organizations, media workers, and concerned members of the public. Through public meetings in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban, we coordinated rolling protest action in the weeks and months following the June 20 protest. According to my records, Right to Know organized or supported 16 protests at SABC offices in Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, Kimberley, and Mangaung, as well as others at ICASA, the Department of Communications in Pretoria, and Parliament in Cape Town. During this time, numerous memoranda were handed to SABC representatives in various offices to raise concerns about various aspects of the SABC crisis. None has received a response. I'd like to just briefly elaborate on our attempts at direct engagement with the SABC. In our initial interview, Advocate Vanara asked for information about interactions with SABC management over our various concerns. In the weeks following the protest ban, the 20 June protest at SABC, and the suspensions of members of the SABC 8, public pressure against the censorship, purges, and management's heavy-handed and obstinate style mounted. The committee will be familiar with these events, but I'll provide some more details. During this time, I was contacted by various SABC staff members and former staff members who informed me of intimidation and harassment from management, threats and punitive actions against anyone who failed to toe the Hlaudi line, and a pervasive climate of fear at the SABC. On Friday, July 1, Right to Know participated in a protest led by media workers, media worker representatives, and a coalition of civil society. This was a march from the SABC to the Constitutional Court. And during the march, 2 members of the Right to Know, myself and Stina Molapo, joined a delegation to meet with an SABC delegation, including Mr. Motsoneng himself. And that took place at the SABC headquarters in Auckland Park. During this meeting, we demanded the immediate reinstatement of the suspended SABC journalists. Mr. Motsoneng attempted to distance himself from the decision, saying that it was an HR decision and that he was therefore powerless to meet our demands. His attempt to evade any responsibility was disingenuous, as it was clear that Mr. Motsoneng exercised total control over such matters and is highly likely to have been directly involved in their suspension. Our delegation pointed out that Mr. Motsoneng could halt the compromised disciplinary processes against the journalists with a mere phone call, but he remained obstinate. Eventually, Mr. Motsoneng agreed that he would look into the matter and report back to the same delegation the following Monday at an agreed-upon time. However, Mr. Motsoneng acted in bad faith. On Monday, the delegation reconvened in Braamfontein in preparation for the meeting with the SABC management as agreed. But shortly before the meeting was due to start, we received a phone call from Mr. Motsoneng, which he basically said that the meeting was off, that he had made up his mind, and that there was nothing to talk about, and that the journalists would not be reinstated. The committee will know that on 26 July 2016, the Labour Court overturned the dismissals of 4 of the SABC 8, reinstating them. On 27 July, after those reinstated journalists were blocked by security from entering their place of work, Right to Know members protested at Auckland Park against this abuse of worker rights. However, later that day, it was announced without explanation that 7 of the 8 had been reinstated. I am confident that the committee will hear has heard further evidence on this matter from other sources. I raise it here because to date there has been no full accounting of who was behind these flagrant abuses of worker rights and under what circumstances the reversal happened. Allow me to briefly outline our key concerns and demands. Following engagements of the various allied groupings mentioned above, a set of demands grew as the crisis progressed and the focus of our collective efforts broadened. These were listed in a number of public statements and memoranda that were handed to SABC management and regional directors. While these demands and variations of them were broadly supported by numerous organizations, for the Right to Know campaign, these included: number one, the immediate reinstatement of the SABC 8. It was clear from the outset that the 8 journalists were simply purged for exercising their independence and speaking out against the extremely authoritarian actions of management. Number two, an end to censorship policies. We noted that the SABC was increasingly leaning towards politically biased coverage and at times actively suppressing the views and content deemed to be critical of the ruling elite. Examples include the SABC's refusal to screen Emmy Award-winning documentary Miners Shot Down, and the shelving of the SABC commissioned documentary on apartheid corruption, Project Spear. The canning of critical news shows, such as The Editors and On the Record. The unilateral prohibition on SABC broadcast journalists reading newspaper headlines on air. The prohibition on broadcasting footage of violent protest. Though ICASA had found that this policy should be withdrawn, the order has been disregarded, as we have heard. And then in engaging media, Right to Know members and leaders have had frequent interactions with SABC journalists and producers covering Right to Know's work. While we have great respect and appreciation for these workers, we have encountered many instances which point to a climate of self-censorship at the public broadcaster, where certain issues are considered taboo. Another core demand was the withdrawal of the unlawfully revised editorial policies. It is a matter of record that the SABC unlawfully revised its editorial policies, failing to properly undertake the required public consultation process. It is a basic principle of good public service media practice that management should not be allowed to interfere arbitrarily in the day-to-day editorial decisions of the newsroom. But the new policy says that content should be referred upwards for approval, giving Mr. Motsoneng and others sweeping powers to interfere with the work of editors and journalists. We demanded that the new policy be withdrawn and redrafted after a full and meaningful public participatory process. This matter has been taken to ICASA by the SOS Coalition and Media Monitoring Africa. Our fourth key demand was the removal of Mr. Motsoneng. We have consistently said that the former SABC COO, Hlaudi Motsoneng, is patently unfit for the job. Despite findings by the public protector and several courts that he is unqualified and was irregularly appointed as COO, Mr. Motsoneng has retained a senior executive position at the SABC. It is a matter of public record that Mr. Motsoneng has been instrumental in purging and victimizing staff, often in flagrant disregard of labor law. We are particularly troubled by reports of the involvement of the State Security Agency in identifying whistleblowers at the SABC and clamping down on those who are disclosing details of mismanagement to the public. It is my hope that the committee will ask us more about this and that these very serious abuses regarding the State Security Agency are not drowned out in the sea of other scandals surrounding the SABC. This dictatorial management also comes at considerable cost to the public. For example, Mr. Motsoneng ignored regulations by increasing his salary from 1.5 million to 2.4 million and beyond, and hiked the salaries of other selected staff, inflating the salary bill by 29 million rand at the struggling broadcaster. It has been reported that the SABC has been called to the CCMA in 190 matters in the past 2 years. Number 5, the dissolution of the SABC board. it is clear that the board has involved itself in all manner of irregular decisions and failed to exercise its duties and provide good governance at the SABC. It is our belief that the board was captured by an untouchable employee of the organization, namely Mr. Motsoneng, and that it needed urgently to be dissolved and for new members to be appointed through a transparent, participatory process. The resignation of various board members has rendered the board incorrect, hastening the urgency for a new board to be appointed. Number 6, the removal of Minister of Communications, Faith Mutambi. During her tenure, Minister Mutambi has been directly implicated in political interference that has undermined the independence of the SABC as a public broadcaster. The Memorandum of Incorporation signed by the Minister in 2014 The Memorandum of Incorporation signed by the Minister in 2014 gave her an inappropriate level of influence over governance decisions at the broadcaster, including overarching powers to influence the appointments and removals of board members and executives. No doubt in the course of this inquiry, the committee will learn more about the irregular interference of the Minister in SABC's governance. We believe her conduct has seriously damaged the public broadcaster and media freedom, and she is not suitable to continue to serve as Minister of Communications. We believe the unlawfully revised editorial policies, giving Mr. Motsoneng ultimate editorial authority, and the Memorandum of Incorporation, concentrating power in the hands of the Minister of Communications, have given two individuals extraordinary and unchecked influence at the SABC. These two developments have grossly undermined the independence of the SABC, as well as the power of the board and the role of Parliament, and ultimately did damage to public broadcasting as a whole. We describe this as a form of state capture. Work before the ad hoc committee. The Right to Know campaign welcomes the steps to establish an ad hoc committee and to hold a formal inquiry into serious damage that has been done to the public broadcaster. R2K has been disappointed that Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Communications did not take further action on the SABC crisis when it met in August. Subsequent events, notably the SCA ruling on Motsoneng's appointment, have made the position of Motsoneng and the sole remaining board member completely untenable. I wish to put it on record that we have some concerns regarding the limited scope of the inquiry. The crisis at the SABC will be at risk of repeating itself if the underlying structural factors that enabled this crisis in the first place are not rectified. Simply put, it will not be enough to simply shake up the current management without strengthening governance mechanisms to guard against political interference. This must include addressing the extraordinary and unlawful powers exercised by Minister Mutambi, who has systematically undermined the SABC's independence by substituting the Companies Act for the Broadcasting Act, that Parliament reaffirm its role in appointments and removals of board members, and make explicit that the Minister does not do this at her own discretion, ensuring that the board is reconstituted through a transparent and open parliamentary process, a public participatory process to review the structures of the SABC and even its charter, and establishing measures to protect and promote editorial independence at the SABC. Lastly, we are concerned that the committee has not taken the opportunity to get input from affected media worker structures, in particular BEMAU and the Media Workers Association of South Africa. Their members have been directly affected by the conduct of Mr. Motsoneng and his allies. We call on the committee to consider getting testimony from these stakeholders. It is our sincerest hope, however, that this committee will result in meaningful steps being taken to halt and reverse the rot at the public broadcaster and hold account SABC management for their trickery and lies and for flouting due process, defying Parliament, insulting the intelligence of the public, and running the SABC as if it were their own fiefdom and not a crucial public institution and asset. Enormous damage has been done, and it will take enormous political will to undo it. But it can be done. We remain hopeful, we remain committed to that vision, as you do, of an independent, vibrant, well-run, and well-funded public broadcaster that holds power to account, meets the needs of our diverse nation, and remains a public asset in the hands of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. The document that you were presenting, can we, with your permission, have it?
You want a hard copy?
Yes, the signed hard copy. It might not be now, later on, but can we get a copy?
Yes, of course.
Chair, no further questions.
Thank you very much, Advocate Vanara. I'm ambushing, I never told you. Can we start with you, Chauke? I know that you're up to it. I'm sorry. We'll start with Chauke, and we'll go all the way around. Honorable members, because we need to buy time, can I limit you strictly to 5 minutes? Thank you.
No, it may be lesser than that, Chair, because the right to know that's straight to the point, in fact. Thank you very much and appreciate the work that has been done by your organization. In fact, that really demonstrates a citizen's relay and your commitment to the country and making sure that our democracy works and it works properly. That is highly appreciated. There are 2 points that I just want to get from you, which is part of what we have dealt with during the hearing. The issue of the state security. How far have you picked up the involvement of state security in regard to, intimidation or harassment of staff? Because that has been one of the areas that freedom of expression seems to be suppressed now at SABC, that workers, in fact, staff can't even speak freely, even to, telephonically. They need to go outside the SABC to speak freely. So that means that freedom is now being suppressed inside SABC. What is your view on that, and what have you picked up?
Thank you, Honorable Chauke. If I may, I will refer you to Murray Hunter, who is our expert on security and secrecy matters. Is that permissible?
I only have 5 minutes of my question. I don't mind to leave the rest and just listen to what you want to share with us. Maybe in the next 4 minutes of remaining.
Yeah, I did ask Cindy who's going to speak, because this is a serious matter. Now, and you indicated, sir, that you're going to speak and you took the oath. I'm reluctant to allow other people to speak, so unfortunately you're going to have to carry it.
Okay. The committee has heard of the state security issue previously. This has come up a few times in the course of the proceedings, I believe. Just to underscore some of the cases of state security involvement. In January 2014, Ellen Chabalala allegedly warned staff that their communications were being monitored. That's one instance. Bemau has also reported that Durban staff were ordered to clear out of their offices for a number of hours while state security did unknown things in their offices. The State Security Agency also was brought in to stop leakers, we believe. And then we heard, the committee also heard that that Mr. Kalata said that as an employee an employee of the parliamentary news team had her computer seized by so-called SABC forensics, the SABC forensic department, who charged that she had leaked information to the DA.
Propose that with the rest of the information, maybe through the chair, you can maybe hand over the detailed information to the chair of the committee, so that I can then move to my second question, because it's clear that you're still trying to find your foot into extracting the rest of the information, but if that information can be given to the chair of the committee, will really be appreciated. My last question, obviously, is around, you raised the issue of stakeholders, especially workers' organizations, that they are not being afforded an opportunity. What will be your proposal? Because the committee currently operates with a particular timeline, and the issue of stakeholders, which were identified by the committee, were specifically to deal with a particular area. Now we are coming up with other stakeholders, which are key role players. What will be your suggestion now that you have looked into the program of the committee?
Well, it's ultimately for the committee to decide. We are concerned that they were not included in the program, given that they represent the interests of a large number of SABC staff. This came as a surprise to us. I'm not sure what sort of arrangements the committee could make to include their voices, but we do think it's important that they are consulted in this process, especially considering that they have a significant presence at the SABC, have had significant involvement in pushing back against SABC management.
Okay, ma'am, the last one, obvious.
No, it's up, sir.
Okay. Yes.
Honorable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation, Micah. I think part of the thing that we're going to have to do as a committee beyond just the inquisitorial process is also give a series of recommendations to the National Assembly about what needs to happen at the SABC. And so you've listed your recommendations, which I think we will take under consideration. But beyond that, about fixing the SABC, because there's clearly serious problems there. Can you speak a little bit more in detail about your suggestions about how we fix the SABC?
Thank you. The crisis that we have witnessed at the SABC is plainly unprecedented. And we have said that this calls for a fitting emergency response. And that, we have said, should entail public participation, and if need be, it should mean going back to the drawing boards. The SABC was radically transformed from a mouthpiece of the apartheid government, the apartheid state, into it was a complicated process. It was not without its problems, but in many ways the SABC of the 1990s that was being transformed, that was undergoing this process of transformation, was in many ways a model of transformation. And that's precisely because it was a very inclusive process. If you look, I think it would be instructive for the committee to look at, for instance, the BBC, which is, again, not without its flaws, not without its problems, but every few years, the BBC's charter is up for renewal. And there has been a process, an ongoing process in the UK of renewing and restructuring the BBC. And that, I read at the time of the SABC crisis, at the time of our ongoing protests, that in that process of restructuring the BBC, something in the region of 220,000 public submissions were handed in. Now, I think that's something to aspire to, a truly inclusive, democratic, open process of reformulating the SABC. I mentioned in my presentation that it may be necessary even to look at the very foundations of our SABC, to perhaps revisit, if need be, the SABC's charter, which may contain some slightly problematic provisions. The same applies to the Broadcasting Act. There may be certain provisions within the Act and the Charter that need to be strengthened, so that there is more to separate management and the whims of management from the day-to-day running of the newsroom. We perhaps should also look at the location of the editor-in-chief. Now, there is litigation around this, but part of the problem with the SABC at the moment, part of the reason for this crisis is because Mr. Motsoneng has such unbridled control over editorial content. And he is given the levers of editorial control, and through him, the state and the ministry are given unprecedented, unacceptable levels of power over editorial control. And so we believe that that mechanisms need to be put in place to guard against political interference, that governance structures need to be put in place to strengthen editorial independence, to give journalists and editors more freedom, more prerogative to take decisions without overbearing management and without the threat of politicians harassing and purging and threatening them. And again, all of this, I must stress, all of this needs to be truly participatory. It's a public institution, it's a tremendous public asset, and we all have a huge stake in the public broadcaster.
Time is up. I should have said this earlier on, colleagues. You know, even if your phone is on silent, it interrupts or it interferes with the transcription that is happening. So I see visitors walking in and out with their phones. Could we request that you put your phone off? Otherwise, we're going to pick up problems going forward. Please put your phones off. Honorable Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. Michael, within the South African context, is SABC the worst or best broadcaster, and why?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Within the South African context, is SABC the worst or best broadcaster? Whatever choice you take, why?
In some sense, the SABC is the best broadcaster. It is the most accessed media organization in the country. It is a media staple for millions of South Africans and is the most influential broadcaster in the country. SABC management, however, exhibits some of the worst, most authoritarian tendencies, most anti-democratic tendencies that are increasingly posing a threat to our constitutional democracy. So it's the best and the worst. It has some of the best journalists. We've seen the SABC 8 appear before this inquiry. We've seen them demonstrate enormous courage and enormous integrity in the face of very serious threats. Threats not only to their livelihoods, but in the case of some, to their lives. And that, for me, is the best of journalism, to be able to hold power to account like that. That sort of bravery and that sort of integrity certainly exhibits the best, not only in South Africa, in the world, the best sort of journalism. But managerial style, SABC's management is the worst of the worst. They have ruled the SABC like a tin pot dictatorship.
I have looked at the principles guiding you. I've just checked that. Is it within your call to go a step further to say so-and-so should go, so-and-so should not go? Is that within your scope?
I don't see why it wouldn't be within our scope to make demands as concerned members of the public who genuinely feel that certain high-powered individuals have been flagrantly abusing their authority.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Oliver. Can we go to Honorable Koza?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, sir. I can assure you that we would like to strengthen our relationship as Parliament with civil society organizations. And whatever that we are putting forward to us, we are taking it seriously. And at an appropriate time, we will consider all the submissions. Sir, I just want to understand you better. Is the right to know only limited to media freedom, or does it also concern itself with the financial sustainability of the SABC?
To some extent, the two things are inseparable. We believe in media freedom and media diversity, that media diversity and media freedom are two sides of the same coin. And in order for there to be meaningful media diversity in this country, that, as I said in my statement, is deeply unequal, not only in material terms, not only in wealth and income, but that is also replicated in access to media.
No, that's
so we
fine,
have to.
Okay, no, I understand. I just want to check with you whether you have seen the multi-choice contract, or if you've heard about it, and what do you make of it in terms of SABC future revenue streams? I must also confess with you, I only read that contract because it was only made available to us recently, only yesterday, and I became concerned about a number of areas in that contract. But I just want to hear from you, your own perspective as the right to know, since you have said, you know, these two things are mutually not exclusive.
For a while now, we have been raising the alarm about the multi-choice contract. It reeks of something dubious, and like so many deals, as we have heard in the process of this inquiry, like so many deals at the SABC, it was done in a way that appears improper, and we have reason to question many of the deals that SABC management has cut. We have long said that this deal is not in the interests of the public broadcaster, that it would end up auctioning off the SABC's crown jewels, its archives, and basically selling the SABC down the river. We certainly are concerned about a deal like this with what is the most powerful media company in the country.
Okay. No, I just wanted to get that because going forward, we need to know whether we have the support of the civil society. Finally, I just want to know, you said there are 190 cases that have been to CCMA. Do you have the breakdown and the levels and the type of grievances that are there? You may not have that information right here, right now, but I'm just saying, do we have it somewhere? And can you provide that to us? Because it will, if we do have, it will certainly help with the analysis when we wind up this process.
This was reported in City Press. I would imagine that if we consult our allies in the unions, we could probably get more details on these.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Honourable Swartz.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for your input. We just want to commend you for the work you've done as an NGO over the years, and in particular with this issue. Thank you for organising the protests and the civil society's sense of outrage at what has been happening at the SABC. Could I just ask you, you touched on the relationship between the Companies Act and the Broadcasting Act. And in our view, we're very clear on this, that when it comes to the context of the appointment of the board members and the removal of office of board members, that is determined by the Broadcasting Act, which sets out in Section 13, appointed by the President on the advice of the National Assembly. Section 15, the appointing body, that is the President, on advice of the National Assembly again. So those steps that were taken by the Minister to remove board members would, in our view, be unlawful. What is your comment on that?
That's precisely what I meant in my statement, that Minister Mutambi's reading of the Companies Act as trumping the Broadcasting Act is wrong and unlawful. We said this at the time. where specific legislation is designed to govern a specific institution, as in the case of the SABC, it cannot be overruled by broader legislation, such as the Companies Act.
And this yesterday also came up when we had the company secretary, and she held a very strong view that the Companies Act trumps the Broadcasting Act. So it is a matter of dispute, but it might be helpful to make it clearer in legislation that there is no doubt. And that might be something that we might need to have a look at a legislative amendment if there is a difference of views. In our view, it's pretty clear, but it seems the SABC seems to hold a different view.
Yes, indeed. And if the if the Companies Act were the governing piece of legislation, if the SABC were governed in terms of the Companies Act like any other state-owned corporation, it would no longer be a public broadcaster. It would be a state broadcaster.
And it sets out a lot of duties in the Broadcasting Act, which is fundamental to the SABC. Could I then just ask, Dr. Khoza asked you about the 190 matters at the CCMA. Did you indicate that, could I ask if I missed the answer, could you give us information in writing on those, or do you have more information on the exact people involved, the period? Do you have more detailed information on that?
The story was reported in City Press, but as I mentioned to your colleague, we could potentially get more information on that from the media unions.
And then just going forward again, you've made a very helpful statement that will be circulated to all of us, but going forward for our deliberations, feel free, and I'm sure, Chair, you will give that offer again, as we are deliberating to the heart of the issues, suggested fundamental changes that we might consider, whether it's changes to legislation, changes to policy. Feel free to help us as we deliberate. It's no good just one or two slight changes. We've got to go to the heart of the problem. So, Chair, thank you. That's all from my side.
Honourable Mathanga.
Chair, thank you. Thank you to you, sir. And my colleagues have already commended you for the work done. Just a few questions. The first one is, you've raised the issue of those in the SABC that were purged. One would assume that you would know that those that were purged were replaced. Do you know as to who replaced them and what is the standing of those replacements?
Sorry, there were sweeping purges at the SABC over the last few months. Are you referring to specific individuals?
No, yeah, well, I don't know. I'm just asking you a question. You had people who were purged from what you were saying, and one would assume that they were replaced. Now, the question is, because we need to fix this situation, do you perhaps, have you done some work to establish as to who replaced those that were purged and what is their character? You know, so that if we finally have to make a recommendation, if indeed certain things have gone wrong even there, as to how do we correct it. So I'm saying, if you know that a good person has been replaced by this horrible person, and you know the character of this person, it can actually help the committee to make an informed decision.
I think that SABC insiders would be better placed to answer this question. There was an awful lot of purges and reshuffles and redeployments at the SABC. A lot of that was about centralizing power around Mr. Motsoneng. I don't have that many names on hand, but we could contribute to this. We could go back and do some research on who replaced whom and so forth. But it was more than just the SABC 8, as this committee well knows.
And you are aware of the court decision on Mr. Motswedi?
Yes, I'm aware.
So it shouldn't be your stress any longer, is it still?
Beg your pardon?
I'm saying it shouldn't be your stress anymore.
We hope.
Chair, the other question I would like to raise, and I know it's a bit of a, I don't know whether I'm fair with that question. As an organization, and indeed I know you've spoken about the review of the editorial policy. It would be interesting to know, but perhaps it may not be something that we may get it now, as to the right of the things we shouldn't know. Do you have those things that we should not know that your organization possesses?
Sorry, are you speaking in general terms about freedom of expression and what doesn't?
Yes. Not in I know that this is a specific matter that we are dealing with, which we agree with, but I'm just asking because personally I would like to take the matters forward even outside this engagement. Have you, as an organization, do you possess these things that we should not know as part of your organization?
I think we've been very open and transparent throughout. We generally like to practice what we preach, so we are not withholding any information that we think is...
That's not the question. Look, there are these things that the public broadcaster should bring to the public, and I think that's the approach. But would you be in a position to help us to say, whilst we are pursuing this agenda, but we believe that these are the things that should not be brought to the public, if there be any?
Yes, we may differ substantially over what should be kept secret and what should be publicly available. Our position is that openness and transparency should be the rule and secrecy should be the exception. But it would depend on what information you're speaking about specifically.
Okay. Chair, my time is over, I suppose. If not, I still have a nice question.
Even if it wasn't, even if it wasn't over, I was going to ask you to stop and pursue this matter offline.
Okay.
But your time is over.
Okay.
Honorable Mukwen.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. We meet again. I'm going to ask you for two inputs in sort of one session, so I'm going to ask you two things at the same time. The debacle at the SABC, underpinned by interference from political powers, has clearly interfered in government issues, in editorial bias, the quality of information that society is getting. How, further down the line, is it affecting society in terms of strengthening democracy, dissemination of information, and social cohesion, those issues? That's the one set. And then you also spoke of state capture. Now, state capture is a wide subject, and it affects, I think, many parts of society. We heard, for instance, of the CEO of ESCOM going into offices of the SABC and dictating to the SABC what they should be disseminating and what not. What other, and then also the state security involved in investigations, what other organs of state and parts of the executive should be investigated in this inquiry in order for us to get a fuller picture? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. How this affects things down the line, I think it's fairly self-evident how a compromised public broadcaster that is as important as the SABC would negatively affect democracy. I don't think I need to explain to this House how important public broadcasting is for democracy and how important knowledge and the free flow of information are for democracy. Now, the SABC is, as I said, the most accessed broadcaster in the country. For many people, it is pretty much their sole source of news and current affairs information. And if you deprive people of that, if you distort that narrative, or restrict that narrative, or control that narrative for narrow political interests, I think it's quite obvious what the effect on democracy would be. And this is something that's recognized in the Constitution and in the laws governing the public broadcaster. not so much in the Companies Act, which is why we say the Companies Act should not be trumped by the Broadcasting Act. But the free flow of information and freedom of expression are the very lifeblood of democracy. I think it would be hard to debate that. And the public broadcaster has a role to inform people, to facilitate the free flow of information, to tell the stories of South Africa and South Africans in all their diversity, and to encourage and promote freedom of expression. So it has a very critical place in our democracy. In terms of state capture and what other organizations should be investigated, we've mentioned state security, the role of state security. We think that's very concerning and would like to see that given a prominent place in the deliberations of this inquiry. We would like very much for the inquiry to really take into account how serious this is, to have the spooks snooping around our state broadcaster and intimidating journalists. Of course, this will have a chilling effect on journalism in South Africa, on journalists whose sources may very well be at risk. I was asked earlier about what information can justifiably be withheld or kept secret. I may have misunderstood the question somewhat, but one thing that does need to be kept secret in the interests of journalism and democracy is sometimes sources need to be protected, and particularly whistleblowers. We've seen what's happened to members of the SABC 8 who came out and took a stand, and we've seen that some of them have had very serious threats on their lives. And so to have spies snooping around the SABC, we think is a very worrying sign. We don't know what information they were looking for. We heard the report, I think it was by Mr. Kalata, who said that a parliamentary reporter's computer was confiscated. And of course, she would have had very sensitive documents on there. She would have had sensitive information that certainly shouldn't end up in the possession of spies. Most importantly...
Thank you, sir. Honorable Kwankwa.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. Firstly, kudos to you, my fellow countrymen and women. I think you're doing an excellent job. I have participated in one or two of your demonstrations, the last one obviously being the C.1 for me. I was very happy to hear you right at the beginning to admitting and acknowledging the fact that the problems at SABC extend beyond the protest policy. I think the protest policy, as you rightly said, is a symptom of an underlying problem at SABC. There are fundamental problems that need to be addressed in order for us to get the SABC working again, in order for the principles of good journalism to take root in that institution again. But you asked a very important point, Mhlekazi. In fact, you raised it, saying that the process of the appointment of the board members should be made more transparent. As a member of parliament, I was under the impression that the process was transparent, but in any event, there's always room for improvement. What exactly would you like Parliament, in the process of appointing and recommending board members to the President, would you like us to improve? That's the first question. The second question has to do with I understand that you'd focus more on the SABC because it's a national broadcaster. But now the question or the criticism that is usually leveled against Right to Know is that it tends to overly focus on the national broadcaster. Yes, it's got a big footprint, and a host of other benefits, but sometimes at the expense of those institutions that are privately owned, which could also be lobbied to play a critical role in ensuring access to information and providing information in a non-partisan manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Regarding your first question on appointments, it's our feeling that Parliament has, to some extent, let the minister usurp its duties in terms of board oversight and this relates to appointments and removals. The inquiry would have heard about the controversial removal of certain board members. This seems to have been done in a very improper way with undue influence of the minister. We have also said in the past that the public protector's appointment is a sort of benchmark, is a good example of, for whatever reservations people may have about the public protector, her appointment process was participatory, was open. The public had a very big interest, a very significant interest in the appointment to the position, and a lot of South Africans were very closely monitoring the appointment process. So we would argue that that any new board, a reconstituted board at the SABC, should follow that sort of process, where there is a call for public nominations, where every interview is available for public scrutiny, where every CV is available for public scrutiny, where the public can really go through each and every candidate with a very fine comb. So we would want to see that sort of process emulated in appointing a new SABC board, and that should not just be a once-off thing. It should be the way of appointing and removing board members. That it certainly should not be up to the whims of the minister. With regards to R2K focusing on the SABC at the expense of other news organizations, I'm sure you're referring to mainstream commercial news organizations. We have faced this criticism before, and we feel that it is unjust. For a very long time, we have been calling for serious changes to the media landscape, for more diversity, and a lot of the time the focus of our campaign for media diversity has been the corporate media. We have protested outside Naspers. We have consistently said that media monopolies should be broken up. We have protested outside ANN7 when the ANN7 journalists were facing suspension and dismissal around the same time as the SABC crisis. We have worked with journalists at ENCA regarding union issues. So we do call out the commercial media. We are, as far as other civil society organizations and NGOs go, we are very critical, I think, of the mainstream media. Our focus on the SABC has reached a high point in recent months precisely because of this crisis. It is, as I have said, unprecedented. This is different to other media organizations in the sense that it is the public broadcaster. We all have a huge stake in it. It is a key institution of democracy. So for that reason, because of just how egregious the wrongdoings of SABC management were, and because of how important this institution is, and how important it is for our own constituents, for our constituent organizations, most of whom rely very heavily on the SABC, it seems to me perfectly rational that this is a major focal point for us.
On that note, thank you, sir. To you and your team, thank you very much for providing us with that information. Members have asked for further information from yourselves, and you have undertaken to go and do some work. So please feel free to provide that information. Let me indicate you don't provide it to the member that requested it. It comes through the office. So when you have that information, please provide it. Also bear in mind that our deadline is the 28th of February, so it will be in all our interests that it's provided as soon as is possible so that it can be, if necessary, incorporated in our report to Parliament at the end of this process. Having said that, to you and everybody else that accompanied you, thank you very much, and wishing you well over the festive season, and may you see a prosperous 2017. Members, you've got 2 minutes. Our next guests are here. 2 minutes whilst we do the turnover, and we will immediately get on to media monitoring. Is it? All right. Members have asked for a slight caucus. Can we just quickly run to V8 for a slight caucus, members?
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates at every hour. Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Give me that paperwork.
Where is your
Give me that paperwork.
Where is your paperwork?
Like this, I'm everything. I don't know what's going on. Suddenly, I'm locked up.
This is not fair, Senator Basietan. Not fair.
Ukuputse rent ka 200. Hape se kupula ka 200. O re ngwana o i-1. 150 plus koloi le yone tlamehile e nne another 150. I'm just the one to lock you out. Yes, you just want to lock me then out. You are starting gangsterism.
No. No.
On Network, we tell you about Africa's social media and technology landscape.
21st century economies rely on technology to truly thrive.
We have quite a comprehensive portfolio of interventions in the tech entrepreneurship space.
And Africans are using tech and social media to solve the continent's unique challenges.
App Nigeria is an online marketplace.
Radio Vibe is a social media platform for radio music. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makamat, and it's time for sports after some heavy going out at the parliamentary session about the SABC's board, their fitness of holding office. Now, time for some sport. Cape Town City FC found the going tough with targets on their back after winning the Telkom Knockout Trophy. The log leaders were stunned 4-0 by Platinum Stars as the league resumed. They weren't the only team to stutter against lower-ranked sides. Orlando Pirates were beaten 2-1 at Maritzburg United. There were 2 goals scored in either half as Dikwena got the better of Cape Town City.
Days after their Telkom knockout success, where they earned a hard-fought 2-1 win over SuperSport United to claim their first silverware in top-flight football, Cape Town City took on Platinum Stars in the league, looking to consolidate their position at the summit of the log table. It was the visitors who got off to a great start, opening their account 4 minutes into the contest, courtesy of a set piece. One soon became 2 Platinum Stars, doubling their lead this time around through the header of Tintswalo Shabalala. Dumiso Mabena, former Orlando Pirates striker, notching up his 5th assist of the season. Looking to reduce the deficit, the home side took the game to their opposition. However, they were reduced to shooting from outside the box. The visitors started the second stanza the way they started the first, probing in search of their 3rd goal of the contest. Two late goals in quick succession by Bonginko Sintulu and Ndumiso Mabena ensured maximum points for the Kwena. At Herigwala Stadium in Pietermaritzburg United fended off a late Orlando Pirates fight back to earn a hard-fought 2-1 win. The victory sees the home side move to 8 on the log, equal on 17 points with the 7th-placed Kaizer Chiefs, who have a game in hand. While Pirates remains rooted in 5th place after 12 games with 18 points. Joseph Mohale, SABC News.
Now, here's what you're looking forward to in terms of PSL action tonight. But first up, a reminder of last night's results. As you can see, there were 2 matches played last night, and the results are there for all to see. Cape Town City 4-0 against, that's a 4-0 drubbing they received at the hands of Platinum Stars. And then, of course, we had Maritzburg United 2-1 win against Orlando Pirates. Tonight, 7:30, a kickoff time for all the matches that are going to get played tonight. First, we've got the FNB Stadium, Bloem Celtic up against Kaizer Chiefs. And then Golden Arrows against Bidvest Wits and Free State Stars. They play Baraka FC at the Global Park. And then out at the old Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane, Chipa United, they visit Polokwane City. Highlands Park up against Ajax Cape Town. This at the Makulong Stadium in Tembisa. 7:30 p.m. once again will be the kickoff times. Now, Everton break Arsenal's unbeaten run and denied them a chance to close the gap to log leaders Chelsea by beating them 2-1 at Goodison Park. And Leicester fell by a 1-0 in Bournemouth. Here are the highlights.
Sanchez. Arsenal have the lead. Ill fortune for Everton. Its path was not exactly true. Gay. Baines. Testing cross, guided in. One fullback tees up the other. Barkley again. Little higher, header down and in. Ashley Williams, first goal for Everton. And it may well deny Arsenal a place at the top of the league. Barkley's corner did the trick. A desperate finale.
9 away league games. But here goes Vardy. Boric comes. Still Vardy. And put behind for a corner. Well, he took it wide. Smith is onside. Chance here for Bournemouth. Pugh! Oh, he's done it! Mark Pugh, on his first Premier League start of the season, has scored his first goal at home since April 2015. The initial save from Afobe was superb, but Pugh picked up the scraps and gives the chance.
You know, if you want to see a look of thunder, that was a look on Arsene Wenger's face. He's well aware of what that loss meant to the side and their attempts to get to the top of the log in the EPL. Now, Mamelodi Sundowns, if you remember, are out in Japan. They're playing in the FIFA Club World Cup. They lost their very first match against local side Kashima Antlers. They're now playing Jeonbuk Hyundai, South Korean side, and they are trailing 3-1 in the 57th minute. Not something we would have been hoping to see, but as you can see, Mamelodi Sundowns doing their utmost to make sure if they can actually make a difference to their fortunes, having traveled all the way to Japan to try and at least get one win, at least to get one match in the bag. This is the 5th place playoff that's being played right now. So as you can see, Mamelodi Sundowns they're battling it out with the Jeonbuk Hyundai out in the middle of the park, and it's been a very interesting tussle so far. But as the scoreline tells you, it's really been tilted in the favor of the South Korean side, who are out there trying to make sure that they get 5th place and not Mamelodi Sundowns. No mistakes at the back. We're hoping that Mamelodi Sundowns pull those 2 back, at least get 2 more goals, and hopefully then play for the win thereafter. This match been brought to you live from Japan, mind you, and no commentary coming out, but I can tell you what, looks like it's been a very interesting match. 4 goals scored in the space of just under 50 minutes. We're in the 58th minute of this 5th place playoff in the FIFA Club World Cup. Now, staying with footballing news, but going a little off the field, an Argentine sports media company will pay around 1.5 billion rand as part of a deal to settle U.S. charges stemming from the bribery probe targeting soccer's world governing body FIFA. Torneo y Competencias S.A. faced a charge of wire fraud conspiracy. Now, court documents state that Torneos was paid millions of dollars in bribes to acquire the marketing and broadcast rights for several major games and tournaments. But U.S. prosecutors confirmed that the one charge will be dropped. It will be if the company abides by the agreement's terms for 4 years. The deal was the first with the company in the FIFA corruption probe. 43 people and entities have been charged as part of the American investigation. To date, 20 people and 2 related companies have pleaded guilty in connection with the probe. Now, Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee, together with some members of his team, has reported back to South African rugby in a review process after what is arguably one of the worst seasons in Springbok rugby history ever. He was joined by outgoing captain Adrian Strauss as well as Pat Lambie and Tendai Mtawarira. SARU President Mark Alexander, who's part of the review process, described the year 2016 as a profoundly disappointing season.
The report back session was led by the Springbok Steering Committee, made up of Francois Davids and James Stoffberg as members of the High Performance Committee, and Yuri Roo, SA Rugby CEO. SARU President Alexander was also present. The coach and the players reported back on a season where 8 of 12 tests were lost in one of the most dismal seasons in Bok history. The committee received feedback on technical, tactical, operational and personnel matters, and what impact management and players believe may have had on team performance. Alexander said the process was given extra attention because of the profoundly disappointing results. He said the process would continue into January and that it should be completed by the end of January. South African rugby is facing severe pressure on and off the field. Changes have been implemented and indabas and reviews have occurred, but the fact remains that it has been a horrible year for SA Rugby and the Springboks. Craig Murray, SABC News, Cape Town.
All right, of course, there are lots of comments that you've been giving us on social media with regards to sports. It's not about all doom and gloom what's happening at the SABC inquiry. We also have some sporting questions. Black Paper Chaser says, laugh out loud, is it possible to fire a caretaker coach? Just wondering. But Augusto Palacios has only lost 1 match. What is wrong with you? That's too quick, too soon. Just hold on to your horses. I Am Black says, congrats to Eric Tinkler, our own getting the title. Now, this is a belated congratulations on the win for the Telkom Cup over the weekend. And this name is very difficult, and I'm not going to read it out. But I will read out what is tweeted, which is anyone who loves soccer, local talent, nation. Okay, anyone who loves soccer and local talent in the nation ought to support Tinkler and pray that SuperSport dreams die to kill a victory of Cape Town City FC. No wonder you've got such a difficult name. Your tweets are difficult to read as well. Zippy Duda, shocked at the Arsenal defeat last night. I thought this year they were the real deal. Arsenal, yes, they lost last night and they've been looking super strong going into that match against Everton at Goodison Park, but they couldn't pull it off. Okiagu Ifiani, if Arsenal FC want to win the league, we need to grind out results. Absolutely. Arsene Wenger's face told you that he agrees with you. Maile Yambani, Sundowns will lift up the upset trophy once more again this season. Motsepe knows how to run for a football club, unlike others. And that's where we're going to leave it with the tweets. We will be bringing up these tweets again later on if we're able to, if we're back in studio. But however, I can tell you what, the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC board and the SABC is back online. And here we go.
Make an oath or an affirmation. Is that okay? All right. So, William Bird and Tandy Smith, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Could we start with you, please, Thandi? Repeat after me, and I am informed that you're going to affirm. I solemnly and sincerely declare.
I solemnly and sincerely declare.
And affirm.
And affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Will be the truth.
Will be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Would you say so? I so affirm.
I so affirm.
Mr. Bird. I solemnly and sincerely declare.
I solemnly and sincerely declare.
And affirm.
And affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Will be the truth.
Will be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
I so affirm.
I so affirm.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me indicate at this point, honourable members, I'm not sure if, or I didn't think that it was necessary for an induction when you affirm or swear. I am saying this because if it is found that information that you provide to this committee, either orally or in writing, and I'm talking from the first witness up to you, if it is found that the evidence that you provide before this committee, either orally or in writing, has been distorted, there are serious consequences. And we hope that this will apply to every other witness that appears beyond this point. We didn't think it was necessary to underline it, but we are underlining it nevertheless. Advocate Vanara, it is 10:02. Could you be done by 20 past, sir?
Sorry to disturb, but just as I just want to find out if we're going to get the presentation. If we're not, that's fine. Sorry.
Members have got your presentation. And I think what you just have to do is to spend the next 29 minutes to take them through the silent features.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Thank you very much. We're very grateful for the opportunity to present to this very important inquiry. While grateful, we're not here with much delight. In fact, we're here with extraordinarily high levels of anger due to the fact that we shouldn't be here. We should be discussing things that should take our broadcasting sector forward and not things that are taking us back to the era of apartheid and how to rebuild things that essentially we've been working on for the last 23 years and that have been systematically undermined by a group of narrow-minded functional morons. So I would ask, seeing as we don't have the presentation up on the screens, if you would do us the delight of following us as we go through our presentation. I'm on the slide that talks about Media Monitoring Africa, and it's not as an advert, it's more about the fact that it gives you a sense of why we're here and what our role in relation to the SABC is. So Media Monitoring Africa, MMA for short, was started specifically to monitor the SABC's coverage in the run-up to our first democratic elections, because there was a concern at the time about whether or not the SABC would be able to deliver free and fair content in the run-up to those vital elections. Since then, we've monitored all elections coverage periods in South Africa, and my colleague Thandi will be presenting some of the critical findings of that. So we've also appeared here before on a number of occasions, and I need to unfortunately remind this House that we were here in 2008, not in this precise venue, it was one of the smaller ones upstairs, before the NCOP was the last time to talk about SABC specifically. It was on the Broadcast Amendment Bill, where we warned in September 2008, and we'll happily make the papers for this and the amendments to the Broadcast Amendment Bill. We warned the committee that if they did not make sufficient and necessary changes to the Broadcast Amendment Act, the crises at the SABC would continue, and in fact they would deepen. And here we are now with the SABC in a state of close to something that is akin to hell, I suspect. So there are 4 parts of our presentation. The first is around the crisis and how we got there, very briefly. Then we're going to talk about our research that we've done, and the value that we bring to this is that we've done over 200 different media monitoring projects. We're an independent NGO, and we're funded by international and local donors. And let me also make a very quick point about this, because I realize that sometimes these allegations are made against civil society organizations that we somehow the stooge of international affairs and the like. The organizations that we are supported by have all of their documentation up online. Their members are South Africans. The strings that are attached to the funding we get require us to submit audits. They require us to meet our mandate, which is in line with the human rights objective and indeed the principles contained in our constitution. So we reject with contempt any such allegations directed in our general direction. So we're going to talk about the SABC coverage of the South African local government elections and how basically they have failed the people of South Africa. We're then going to go back in time and talk about Verwoerd's Ghost in relation to the SABC protest ban coverage. And then we're going to touch a little bit on the selling the family jewels, and that's around the SABC and multi-choice deal. So if you look at kind of where we are, we would have noticed that not the last Parliamentary Portfolio Committee meeting, but in fact the one before that, the SABC board, when there actually were more than one member, assured everyone that there was no crisis at the SABC. Yet if you look at the figures, 12 CEOs since 2008, 12. This is not a stable institution. We've had 3 boards in 10 years, excluding the interim board. On one of the slides that you've got before you, you'll see that it's titled Crisis, What Crisis? And what we did was a bit of fun, was we took Mr. Motswaneng's quotes from the media. We routinely analyze different media, and we have taken all of the elements of what he's been quoted as saying in approximately 30 to 40 South African media over a year's period. And if you look at that word cloud, what strikes you is that nowhere on that word cloud do you see SABC. What you do see rather largely is Cloudy's first name and other words that don't necessarily relate to anything directly related to the SABC's public service mandate. This is why we're in the crisis that we're in.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I would like to take the next few minutes to talk about the SABC's coverage of the local elections. And I'll just focus on a few of the key findings that we have. Our monitoring period was the 1st of June to the 10th of August. We monitored approximately 73 different media, including all of the SABC platforms and its various competitors. For this purpose, we want to focus on how the SABC specifically performed during the period, and it's critical that the SABC adheres to the highest standards of broadcasting, and that is to say that it's the coverage that is diverse, coverage that is equitable, and coverage that is fair. The first finding I'd like to go through is the political party coverage. And what we are seeing in these results are that the top 5 parties have been focused on. And this indicates that the SABC treated the coverage of the elections more as national elections and not necessarily as local elections. What we would have liked to see with the local election coverage would be more prominence given to independent candidates, to smaller parties. But so what we have seen is more coverage and prominence given to the top 5. those parties being the ANC, the DA, the EFF, NFP, and IFP. And what's interesting to note, if you see, I'm making reference to the political party slides in the presentation, is that on the dedicated election debates on SABC 1 and SABC 2, on those programs, you do see a variance in the results where other parties are given a platform. But if you look at SABC, other channels overall, you do see very similar trends with the political party coverage that is given. Then I'd like to move on to the voices that we heard and focusing on gender. Now, gender is an issue that isn't spoken about as much as it should be, and we, through all of our research, we do take a very gender-focused element to the findings. So we'd like to just touch on what we've seen also during these local elections. And again, the SABC's mandate, given the SABC's mandate, it has a greater responsibility to ensure that there's more equitable coverage and more women's voices are heard. Having said that, we do see that this hasn't been the case during this monitoring period, where you have an average breakdown of 24% male, 24% female, sorry, and 76% male, and that's on a relatively global average of gender breakdown. With the SABC's results, we look at 4 big SABC platforms, and the results are far below that general average, where you have various channels, Ukhozi FM sitting at 10% female and 90% male, Umhlobo Wenene sitting at 14% female. So these trends are very worrying, and these results in itself is a failure to meet its mandate. Moving on to looking at whether the coverage was fair or not. And for us, fairness in the election period is critical, and it's imperative that all media cover the elections fairly, but more importantly so, the SABC. And the reason for this is that fairness of coverage has a huge impact on the overall nature of the elections. So we have various indicators that we look at in terms of bias reporting. And this isn't necessarily one item that is biased or one element, but it's rather a pattern over time that we analyze. And for the first time in our monitoring history of the elections, and as William mentioned earlier, we've been monitoring every election period since 1994. For the first time, we have seen systemic bias in the SABC's coverage of the elections. And again, this is a failure to meet its public service mandate. What I mean by when I say that we found bias, the results show that there's only a 10% bias in the coverage. And this doesn't sound that bad, that terrible. But if we focus in on that 10%, what we find is there's channel-specific bias, which hasn't been there before. You look at SABC2, at the Tonga and Venda News, that's sitting at 34% of its coverage was biased. Morning Live on SABC2, 22% bias. SABC3, English News, 15% bias. So just to give you an indication of what we're seeing when we talk about bias, in those top 3, I'm going to focus on the top 2. In the SABC Tonga Venda News, for every 3 stories put forward in their news bulletin, a third of them indicated that there was bias. Of those biased stories, 84% of bias favored the ANC. looking at SABC Morning Live, SABC2 Morning Live, so we see a 22% biased coverage. And what we're seeing is that ANC was accessed double as much as the DA and 5 times more than the EFF. And for us, bias indicates favoring versus unfavoring, favoring of a political party, not giving a political party a chance to respond if there are allegations made or stories that appear, as well as language used within the story covered. So just to reiterate, it is the first time that we are seeing this amount of bias come in. And I think just to state that we are aware that there is going to be various elements of subjective broadcasting, and that you can't necessarily always get response from various political parties, but it is the SABC and other media have a responsibility to try and balance the coverage as much as possible. And given the results, the programs in question have served to undermine the mandate of the SABC and its credibility during the election period.
Thank you. So what those findings, we believe, clearly indicates, and I'm sorry that we've had to rush through them, we have also sent, you'll be aware, members, copies of the full report, which are publicly available. And we are very happy to discuss with anyone if they would like to have them unpacked in more detail. But what they do indicate is the impact of this crisis on the public broadcaster in an election period. There can be arguably no other greater period when fairness is required. And to its credit, the SABC in previous elections have, despite certain errors here and there, have performed admirably well. So this isn't a thing that this has always been that way. No. In fact, we've frequently pointed out that the SABC previous to these elections have covered more stories, more political parties in greater diversity, often had greater levels of gender, often covered more children's issues better than other media. And in these elections, they didn't. And we believe that this is directly linked to these issues. If we now turn to the protest ban, I think we're familiar with the basics of it, and they're written before you, so I don't want to go into too much detail. But we do know that journalists were fired for doing their job. And I believe that this is, again, linked to the thing that was raised by the chair at the start of the session. I think that in addition to the outrage that the members here have expressed to this and the recommendations, the callousness with which the SABC themselves responded to this sickens me to my stomach. It's repulsive and simply disgusting, and they cannot be allowed to get away with their response to it. Aside from everything else, they owe their journalists a significant grovelling apology before the nation for the fact that they said this has nothing to do with the SABC. Moving back to the protest ban, we know that this was also supported by the minister, and I know that she'll be appearing later, and I'm hoping that you're going to put some difficult questions to her on this particular issue, because she supported it despite the fact that it being clearly and blatantly in violation of our constitution and the SABC's own code of conduct, irrespective of whether it's the ones that are illegal or not, and their editorial policies. So MMA, SOS, which is the support our colleagues, and the Freedom of Expression Institute took a case to ICASA, the CCC, and we won. And as part of that, as you're aware, because the regulator presented, I think, among the first to you, we wanted to see if they complied with the order. So we started to do some research, and we didn't believe that they were complying, given that there was no official statement issued to their journalists and no instruction to them that they should reverse it. And clearly this is important because it had a chilling effect in the news. And we know for a fact, and this is also covered in our elections report, that the protest ban was in full force during the run-up to our local government elections. And the critical point here is simply this. If you can't believe what they're showing you in and around public violence of elections, how on earth do you expect ordinary citizens to believe just about anything else that you put on the channels? This is a massive implication for our democratic space. So the various data is there specifying what periods we monitored. We monitored 3 separate weeks. Over 95 bulletins and 950 news items were monitored. Now, if you get to that page, it's called Key Findings of Violent Footage, and you'll see two pie charts that look almost like the inverse of each other. And what they show is this, is that we asked where protest items were covered. Did the footage show people involved in active destruction? Because that's what they said they didn't want people to see for a variety of reasons. Some of them moronic and others slightly less moronic and others frankly just laughable. But what you'll see there is that in the overwhelming majority, they failed to show the actual violence. What they did show in the pie chart on the right of that slide is that they showed the aftermath, which is what they said they were going to do. Bear in mind, these are 3-week periods after the protest ban and after the SABC said they were complying with it. In other words, we believe that they have actively deceived or lied to us, and it's in the public interest that we understand that they've lied to us about these particular issues. So if we look at the protest ban, we see that violent protests were covered, but far less than non-violent protests, both in terms of prominence in the bulletins and in terms of the number of stories. So the violent protests were often put further back in the news bulletins, despite all of the things going on. And the footage of the aftermath was shown. So we believe that this is pretty conclusive evidence and supports the regulators' finding that the SABC is in complete violation of their order. Moving now to our other item in relation to the dodgy deal between the SABC and MultiChoice. Media Monitoring Africa and the SOS are currently involved in a competition case. There was a matter heard, I think, just over a week and a half ago. Forgive my dates on that, but so we do have a vested interest in this case, and our reason for entering it is that we were opposed to it as it changed a fundamental policy issue of the SABC. And it also effectively sold off the SABC's programming archives, and it did this all too cheaply. You will know, I'm sure, from your other experience in relation to broadcasting matters that while 553 million rand over 5 years sounds like a lot of money, in broadcast terms, this is not a lot of money. And yet look at what they got for it. So MultiChoice did very well. The SABC clearly did not do very well. Well, some within the SABC allegedly did. We know that Mr. Motsoeneng apparently got some nice bonuses, which is a bit like rewarding a paedophile by giving him access to more children. So we know that the SABC has also not been willing to hand over relevant documents, although I understand recently that they have handed over documents. And yet at the same, so there's something funny going on here, right? There's an unwillingness to talk about these things, and we know from our own court experience that they were unwilling to hand over documents, or they said they lost them, or they couldn't find them. And yet, MultiChoice says, no, this is fine. This is a normal deal. I don't know what you're going on about. This is a perfectly ordinary licensing agreement, right? Those things have been stated in court papers and in public forum. So the question that we have to ask around that, and that we would like you to engage with, is if it was an ordinary deal, why were there concerns about the regulator and whether or not they thought that this would pass muster, right? I don't imagine that if it's an ordinary deal that you would automatically put in a clause that says, we might need to check if this goes with the regulator. And the second question then is, why would you include a clause stating that the SABC CEO and the MultiChoice CEO will meet annually to discuss matters? Is that part of every agreement that you put that in for them to sit down at a table and say, okay, let's discuss matters? Is that part of ordinary licensing agreements? I'm not sure. The point is, though, and we would support this honourable committee calling before it some of the people from MultiChoice, because we are certain that they would be far more willing to give valid answers than perhaps some of those that have presented from the SABC. So moving to our conclusions and some of our requests, we see that the research has demonstrated we believe that the SABC has failed to meet its public service mandate, especially during one of the most crucial periods in the run-up to local government elections. We've found for the first time systemic bias on programs, which we believe constitutes a clear threat to our democracy. We've seen a failure and or refusal to obey ICASA's orders to reverse the public protest ban, which shows the SABC board and senior management do not believe they're accountable to the public. And we see that their vested interests including big bonuses, allegedly at least, in regard to the SABC MultiChoice deal. So what this evidence shows, and the reason our presentation was called Why These Crises Really Matter, is that all of the other things you've heard have been in and around the SABC. These are the things that impact the content that every South African has to be exposed to. These are the things, this is where the rubber hits the road, as they say, where this crisis impacts South Africans. We've heard about their loss in audiences and their loss in advertising revenue. These crises are very real. And in fact, you see a management team that is not only in crisis, but one that has gone rogue. You know, there's lots of talk about rogue units. You want to find it? It's there. It's sitting at Auckland Park. Well, it was partly anyway. We believe that those responsible must be fired and held accountable. We believe that there should be a full investigation into this deal with the SABC and MultiChoice. And we believe that Parliament needs to act too. Beyond this hearing, clearly we need to change the law. We drafted, and by we I'm suggesting Media Monitoring Africa and the SOS Public Support Broadcast, Public Broadcasting was there. We drafted these things for Parliament in 2008. If only we'd had a little bit more foresight then. If we don't do these things, we're merely going to start a new crisis. So it might be well and fine to recommend that these people are removed and fired. Good. But we need to change these things in the law. We also would argue very strongly that the SABC's independence needs to be far more strongly secured and protected. And in fact, we believe that in this regard, one of the critical recommendations must be that the SABC become a Chapter 9 institution. So in wrapping up, you'll see I've got a quote. It comes from a rather famous case. It's by our Chief Justice Mogoeng, commonly known as the Nkandla judgment. And in the introduction, he says, "For this reason, public office bearers ignore constitutional obligations at their peril. This is so because constitutionalism, accountability, and the rule of law constitute the sharp and mighty sword that stands ready to chop the ugly head of impunity off its stiffened neck. It is against this backdrop that the following remarks must be understood. If these values are not observed and their precepts not carried out conscientiously, we have a recipe for a constitutional crisis of great magnitude. In a state predicated on a desire to maintain the rule of law, it is imperative that one and all should be driven by a moral obligation to ensure the continued survival of our democracy." This quote is so incredibly apt for this particular crisis that you're seeking to investigate. And we call on you to chop the ugly head of impunity off its stiffened neck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bird, just one or two questions. The first is, you previously did similar work for the SABC for which they paid you. And I'm raising this because I don't want people to come and say, you did this on your own because you didn't get the business from them. You went to write a bad report about them. If you can just comment on that. Secondly, did you conduct a similar exercise in respect of other media houses, particularly in the space within which the SABC operates? And if so, can you provide us with a similar report?
Thank you, sir. Yes, previously we've been paid to, as part of an open tender process, we did commissioned work for the SABC on how the SABCs performed during an election period. I'm not aware that they put out a tender or anything for that for the 2016 local government elections. If they had, we would have applied, as anyone else may have. We were supported in this work by two other donors. It was not a case of looking for these things. In fact, when you do this work, you hope that you don't. Our default bias in our media is that we assume the media are fair, and we look for overwhelming evidence to produce or to point us in a direction that suggests otherwise. On the second issue, yes, we monitored, as my colleague Chandi pointed out, we monitored 73 media in these local government elections, so that includes some of the SABC's competitors. We have got an online version of that report on our website. And we'd be happy again to make available specific comparisons for the committee if they should so request.
Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Nkwankwa, your 5 minutes starts now.
Chairperson, I'm not going to ask any questions due to the political nature of this matter. I want to agree with you in saying that in many instances the coverage has been, especially around elections, has been skewed in favor of the largest parties without overly politicizing it. I could if I want to. I'll give you an example. For instance, in the Eastern Cape, we got 6.6% of the votes in the 2014 national and provincial elections. That is just over 134,000 votes. But if you looked at our coverage, it was non-existent. Non-existent. It was nowhere to be found and nowhere to be seen. And we still battle with that problem. So I'm agreeing with you to say it's a matter that we need to address. The other one, for instance, look at political parties such as the IFP, sister opposition parties, and NFP, which were the third and fourth largest parties respectively in that province. You could see that in terms of the coverage, they were accorded that status every time the campaigning was covered in the KwaZulu-Natal and so on. So it's a major challenge that we need to actually look into. But I think where coverage is to a large extent very fair would be on SABC radio. I think an area where there's too much contestation for space would be TV. And to a large extent, one can say, I put it to you, that we received, even as opposition parties and the women's voices that we are talking about, were covered actually very fairly on radio than they were on TV. What is your take on that one is the first question.
So the principle of equitable coverage is one that we've engaged on with various media houses and the bodies like the IEC and the regulator. And the SABC, in fairness to them, have got an incredibly hard job to do around how on earth you kind of spread the multiplicity of parties that are there. And by and large, as I've said, previous to these elections, they've done, I wouldn't necessarily want to say a brilliant job, but certainly a much better job than many others. If you look at that kind of, if you look at the broad shape of the election graph, you'll see that the ANC doesn't generally get the level of coverage that it has in Parliament, right? But the broad shape of it is that it'll go the ANC, the DA, and then it used to be it was COPE in the 2009 elections, and now it's the EFF, of course. But that kind of broad shape tends to be followed across the majority of media in South Africa. It changes from radio to radio, so you do find that regional thing. So you do find higher covered levels of coverage. Depending on where the radio stations are based for some of those different political parties. So you would expect greater coverage of the DA, for example, in the Western Cape, because, of course, given the level of power that they have here, and that is reflected, broadly speaking. So in and of itself, that isn't, we don't believe, a problem, right? It's when it becomes significantly imbalanced, and it's when you look at the nature of that coverage where it's overtly and clearly biased either in favor or clearly disfavors a political party. The gender issue, I must just tell you, doesn't hold. Gender is an issue that the SABC has not taken with any degree of seriousness for a longer time.
Any concrete proposals about how to change that? I'm asking you that question primarily because you said the local government elections were covered the same way that one would cover national elections, even though the dynamics are completely different. How would we address that problem? That's why I've decided to cite, the provincial elections as probably a guide as to look at the strength of a political party regionally before you consider which political party to give airtime. Obviously, the party that rules and the number of votes at national level would be considered. That's why I'm asking you, are there any concrete proposals about how to change it and make it more equitable?
So if you look within the SABC, previous to this, again, they had a fairly complex formula around how you determine equitable coverage. It's not an arbitrary thing. And if you look at our data, you'll find that for elections debates, you can see that formula in play, right, where they do give a lot of other parties a lot more airtime than otherwise. So it's not like there's something necessarily new that we need to do here. We need to take the stuff that has been developed over wonderful democratic history and simply apply it again in a way that is open and transparent. We have said in our report, I think somewhere, that we talk about the need to debate and discuss what constitutes equitable coverage, because it is a challenge for small parties as to how on earth they can possibly compete with some of the bigger ones. But again, that's not unique to South Africa or indeed to the SABC.
That's all.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mokoena.
Thank you, Chair. We made an interesting finding in regional broadcast. We found that we as an EFF, where we were slightly better covered, we did better in terms of the elections. It's not to say that, you know, if you're better covered, you know, it necessarily results in... but I'm interested in the your inputs to the NCOP on the Broadcast Amendment Bill. What of your inputs were the major ones that you thought could be impediments to the growth of the SABC?
So two brief responses to that. Our colleagues who will be presenting subsequent to this, SOS have got very clear concrete proposals on how we can fix the Broadcast Amendment Act. I don't want to preempt anything that they say, but we are also very happy to share with the committee because we had the draft amendments. We'll share those. They related to appointment of the board, the nature of the interim board, the transparency, and in fact relating to things around who should have the power to hire and remove executive members.
Thank you. And that'll obviously affect the memorandum of incorporation and any other documents that fall under the SABC.
Yes, again, so our colleagues are going to speak to the MOI specifically, which is clearly and patently in the way it's currently done a complete and utter disaster.
Okay. The other thing that I'm interested in is that the bias in reporting, like we said when the SABC 8 was here, it's not a new thing. But what the interesting development in this version of bias reporting is that it's now targeted an individual within an organization. So we're slowly gravitating towards a dictatorship instead of a bias to a political party. What's your comment on that? We've seen, for instance, how Mr. Hlaudi would instruct that a certain individual must be depicted in a certain way, and that negative reporting against that individual must not be broadcast.
I think clearly it's simply and patently outrageous, and it's completely and fundamentally unacceptable. I don't think if any of us in this room were asked to name the COO or CEO or acting banana bread, whatever other position they choose to invent, we would be able to nominate or name such a person from any other major media house in this country. The fact that that person has taken center stage and has dictated the level of coverage. In fact, we were going to start this presentation with a 7-minute interlude while we had praise singers come in and sing for us, but we didn't have the money and the time, or sadly not the power.
Last question, the protest ban. The other unintended effect that it's had is that it has assisted in the failure of the broadcaster to give evidence to who is instigating violence, because it's not in the public domain. We're not able to see who did what. What is your comment to that?
So in our protest ban report, you'll see that at the end we give a more recent case study. It was from October, where there was some violence in Johannesburg. There was a jazz club. There were some of our most incredible local singers were singing that evening, and some protesters burnt down an SABC OB van. The SABC was there, their reporters were there, and yet they chose not to show us that, even though. So it gives the public a very clear and overtly distorted version of reality, as if somehow violence occurs by marauding people. And the other challenge with this is it feeds directly into racist stereotypes that these people have no thoughts, they have no context, they have no reason, they have no rationality. They're just beings that go and run and attack things with no kind of rhyme or reason. And of course, the research on much of the community-based violence shows that that is simply not the case.
Honourable Mafala.
Chair, thank you. No. I think we should raise the issue that South Africa is a constitutional country. The constitution of the country is the supreme law, and all of us and all institutions are subject to it. So it is it's unfortunate that Mr. Bennett chose to say, compare South Africa of today with the racist, autocratic, apartheid South Africa. So I think it's unfortunate. But the second problem I have is that he says he comes here, he's angry. I have a problem with a person who starts a meeting by telling us that he's angry. Because, well, for me, it's a decision that you have made to be angry. I think you should keep it to yourself. You must not come and behave like Claudi. But the issue that is crucial, Chair, is I think very important issues have been raised. And I think colleagues here have already corroborated some of them. But the issue that I find interesting here is, this is research work. In research, if you leave other variables, you have a story that you want to tell. Now, let me just pull one aspect, your demographics. You've chosen political parties, you've chosen gender. Why did you leave race out? Because it would be interesting to hear as to how the race coverage occurred during the elections, because it's a very important variable. As I'm saying, when you do your analysis, there are these variables that are crucial, and you left the race, and why did you leave the race variable? And what is the outcome of that race variable in the statistics?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Sure, that's a bit of a put down comparing me to Mr. Motsoneng. No. And let me be clear about something. I did not mean to suggest for a moment that South Africa today, even with the SABC as it is today, is anything like as we were under apartheid, right? Those are completely fundamentally different things. And if that was the message that came across, I humbly apologize and withdraw that unreservedly. What I intend to put across with that was that these actions are things that seek to take us back to that kind of place where there were no rights, where there was no accountability, there was no transparency, there was no logic to things, there was greed and corruption of a level that we had moved away from significantly. So that's what I meant by that point. On the point of anger, yes, I guess anger is a choice. I'm not sure about emotions, but I think that people should be angry about where we are with the SABC, precisely because we're better than that as a nation. We can do, and we do the most incredible and amazing things as people in South Africa. So for us to be having to deal with this level of debate about saying, oh, let's have a protest ban as though this is some kind of a clever idea. No, we should be saying, how on earth can we be moving forward in a digital environment? How do we make digital issues address fundamental issues of inequality? How do we make sure all people get a voice in our broadcasting media? Those are the things that I would like us to be discussing. But okay, around the race. So that's why I'm angry, and I maintain that. So, around the race issue, race is a critical indicator for us. This is a matter of time, and I don't believe that the coverage around the election specifically impacted the manner in which the SABC represented race specifically. We're very happy to engage with you extensively on this. We're one of the few organizations who seek to continue to expose issues around race representation in media, because we agree it's of fundamental importance.
No. Chair, well, I think whilst appreciating this analysis, but there must be an appreciation of the capital that each organization or individuals holds in society. For instance, Nkwango was saying that in the Eastern Cape, in the radio, they actually got sufficient coverage. And I can't find it in the report in a way. Julius gets super coverage.
Honorable Malema.
Thank you, Chair. Oh.
Julius.
Yes,
Honorable Malema.
Mr. Julius Malema receives quite substantive coverage. And but indeed, I think the issues that you have raised here are very interesting. And I guess it's something that we will have to look at. But as I conclude, Chair, there must be an appreciation that whilst this is a committee of parliament, this is an ad hoc committee on the SABC and not the committee to which you were referring to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Matango. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the very insightful input. As a representative of the ACDP, obviously we welcome some of the inputs that you have made, but I'd like to rather discuss the broader issues that we are all without party differences, and that is the matter of the multi-choice deal. We've got a document here in the Competition Appeal Court where you are, as Media Monitoring Project, an appellant, and it's the information there is staggering, I think. And we appreciate that a lot of the commercial information has been deleted, but just very quickly, where is that matter now as far as its hearing? There's obviously been a tribunal hearing, and this is a further hearing that's taken place on appeal. And quite significantly, there's a quote from Professor Maguve, who appeared before us yesterday and seemed very vague about the multi-choice deal, where he says that at the launch of the Encore channel, which was a culmination of the deal, multi-choice, thank you for this wonderful partnership. Actually, for me, I would have preferred it not just to be a partnership, it should be a marriage, etc., etc. We love you so much, multi-choice. Now, maybe it was unfair, I didn't have this document, I would have liked to have put it to him yesterday. But it seems that he has a lot more knowledge of this deal than he would have indicated yesterday as chairman of the board. So obviously that's a great concern. If you can touch on it very briefly. And then secondly, your investigation of other deals, such as the information that we had from Vuyo Mvuko of the relationship between the SABC and TNA and the ANN7 breakfasts with New Age. Are you aware of that? Have you done any investigation? And maybe the SOS Support Public Broadcasting can also comment on this, because we understand that the SABC is in fact, well, according to the evidence, Morning Live resources are being diverted, I'm told, to pay for the production costs of TNA breakfast, a total rival. Have you done any investigation into that as well? Thank you.
Thank you. The short answer to that is no. We haven't investigated we're not an investigative organization. What we do is where the opportunity arises and where we've got something to contribute, we will participate in strategic litigation, as we believe that the current matter is. I do know that some of the matters around the TNA breakfasts and the role of the SABC have already been exposed in media independently, and I would hope that some of the bodies responsible would investigate those things. I mean, traditionally, of course, the board is meant to report to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on these things, and I think that they should have been asking them some of these difficult questions, because this isn't the first time we've heard that particular set of allegations. On where the multi-choice case is now, I think it was 10 days ago in court before the Western Cape High Court, because we submitted a complaint that the SABC had not been forthcoming in particular the SABC, let me just stress, had not been forthcoming in relation to the documents that had been the order of the Competition Tribunal. And so then it's turned on, and forgive me for paraphrasing here, but it turned on the issue as to the investigative powers of the commission. and whether and to what degree they have those or don't have those. And we're currently awaiting judgment on that particular matter.
Thank you. And then lastly, just on the ICASA complaint about the banning of the protests and the non-compliance, according to your research, of the order that was given by ICASA. Are you aware that criminal action has now been laid, and are you aware of any further process in lines of that criminal action? The board chairman seemed to be unaware of that yesterday as well.
Yes, we were aware of it. We heard the regulator announce it, I believe, during their input to this particular ad hoc committee. And so we know about that. I'm not sure if they've laid a charge. I know that they laid a charge on the basis of non-compliance with the board resolution. I don't know if they laid a charge on the issue of compliance with the other element of their particular order, but we've agreed to work closely with the regulator to see if we can assist in that regard.
Honourable Khoza.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Media Monitoring Africa. Just one thing that I think we need to pass through. When you were putting together when you were monitoring your media and putting the data together, were you objective? And did you take the factual aspects into account? What do I mean by that? The reality is that in South Africa, the African National Congress is the ruling party, and therefore, your member of the executive will inadvertently be ANC. And inadvertently, those people will tend to enjoy more media coverage. And that's how the nature of news is. I just want to check with you on that aspect, whether you did take those aspects into account. Because there is some very useful information in what you are giving us here.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The short answer is, are we objective? No. Are we fair in the manner in which we approach it, and are we clear about the assumptions on which we approach it? Yes, we are. So those things are outlined quite in some detail in the introduction to our full report on that. We work from a human rights-based framework. Our constitution, which I carry with me, is the basis of that document. So our assumption is that media seek to be fair, that they don't go out to be biased in any way, shape or form. So the findings, as I've said, around you would expect the ANC to dominate media coverage. It has done for almost every single election period.
But then say in your own findings, you are saying the ANC, and this is the key finding that you've put in here. The ANC was assessed double the DA. And it's like now there was something wrong with that outcome.
Okay, so perhaps that's a matter of context for that particular slide. So if you look at the levels of party coverage, that's one thing. If you look at how often people speak within news items, that's quite a different thing. So if you're looking at issues of, and that is referring specifically to biased items, so in those items where clearly favoured or clearly disfavoured, either the ANC, the EFF, DA, or etc.
All right, so now I understand, but there's something that I need to comment on. I honestly think that your choice of words are just way too ideologically emotive. The fact that you are also going to an extent of talking about Verwoerd's ghost, to me, you become very, very subjective. And you must remember, when Hlaudi Motsoneng started doing these things, the ANC came out in the open and they challenged Motsoneng. In fact, some of the witnesses that came here during this interview did say, in fact, Motsoneng is on record having said, he doesn't care about the ANC. Now, when you are putting these kind of statements across, you are actually suggesting that Motsoneng has an ideological backing behind him, when in fact he may have Yes, probably may have a particular minister supporting him, but not necessarily the party as an institution. And I do think that you overstretch there, and I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
You've got 1 minute if you want to respond.
I think that, thank you for that. I mean, the point is well made and taken. I don't think that we suggest in these reports that Mr. Motsoneng is driving an ANC agenda. I don't, not at all. What the reference to Verwoerd's ghost is that the kind of approach where you have a person sitting at the top instructing minions at every level below to do and implement things is akin to the way in which the Nationalist Party government sought to run and administer the SABC. There was a lot of work done to ensure that there were various checks and balances created within the SABC to ensure that that kind of thing couldn't happen. So is it an unpleasant stretch to take to suggest that those are the same tactics that the Nationalist Party government did? Maybe it is an unpleasant stretch, but it's certainly an accurate one.
No. Honorable Khoza, please. Honorable Khoza. And Honorable Masango. No, Honorable Khoza, we're not going to allow this. No, I'm not.
Point of order, Chair.
No,
I'm raising the issue of the sound outside, whether it is not affecting the recording. I think it's quite heavy.
Honorable Khoza. Honorable Oliwe.
Thanks, Chair. With your disclaimer of anger, how objective is the contents of this presentation?
As I said, we are very clear about the assumptions that we use in doing the research. The anger isn't about the research. The anger is the situation that we find ourselves in. We've been monitoring the elections since we've started, and there's no anger about that. We see it as an essential part of our democratic process. The anger, Honourable Member, is directed at the fact that we are here and we're seeing one of our critical public institutions being undermined, being treated as though it's some kind of thing that can be toyed with for personal gain. And so I don't believe that that anger impacts certainly not the findings in any way, shape or form, and I'd welcome any kind of comment that would demonstrate that.
In your presentation, you indicated that in 2008 you made a presentation to the NCOP. You indicated that you've also presented to the committee, and it was as if you have lost hope. Do you trust this process of ours?
Sure, that's a difficult one. I think that what we've seen in recent times, the establishment of this inquiry and the previous meeting of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee gives us hope once again that action can and will be taken. I think that we've seen a very strong and direct response, not only from this particular inquiry, but also from other critical bodies like the independent regulator. So it's never too late. You know, I think that we've got an incredible democracy if we just adhere to some of the processes we set out.
You respond like a politician. Do you trust this process? Yes or no?
This particular inquiry, I have no reason to doubt it. Our dealings with the people involved here, the level of questions, the interrogation from the honourable members would give me far greater cause for hope and optimism. So yes, we do trust this.
In your slide, which talks to key findings, especially the area of political party coverage, you are saying in bullet 3 some positive exceptions in elections dedicated programming where greater diversity covered. But you chose, when you were presenting, to only articulate the negative ones. Can you share with the country even the positive aspects?
Thank you. to reiterate the positive findings of the political party coverage, with the election debates, the dedicated channels, what we did see was an opportunity for various political parties to voice their opinions, to speak about their manifestos, to have those debates, and that's the kind of coverage that we would have liked to see further. So, yes, we did focus on the other aspects of political party coverage, but it was important to do so, and I think it's also important that we did highlight the positive, and that did reflect in the election coverage, the election debate programming.
Thanks. On the slide which talks to protest ban conclusion, your first bullet is saying protests were covered on SABC TV. Your last bullet is saying SABC did not adhere to the order and deceived SABC staff, the regulator, parliament, and the people of South Africa. Can you bridge the gap between those two bullets?
Thank you. That's a lovely question. So if the point of the protest ban was the SABC said, they didn't say we're not ever going to cover protests. They argued that they weren't going to cover violent protests and people guilty of destroying public property. The fact that we know that they were instructed not to cover the right to know peaceful protest supports our argument further. But that conclusion then it says, and if you look at the full report on that, you'll find that they did cover protests because it's part and parcel of any news organization's news agenda, but many of them were in fact seen to be peaceful protests. So a lot of the protests that were covered in those periods were often labor things, labor disputes. They weren't, however, the ones that were often the ones that were violent. So when we say in our conclusion they covered protests, we're referring to that broader category, but did they show the actual violent footage, which the protest ban said they would not show? No, they didn't clearly, and then that then leads us to that particular conclusion.
Honourable Venda.
Thanks, Chair. I think anyone who's watched proceedings over the last week about what has happened at the SABC should be angry. If you're not angry, then I think there'd be something wrong with you. I do not think it is the duty of this committee to regulate the emotions and feelings of people that come to this committee to provide us with information so we can make our decisions. I found that very wrong. I think it's an objective fact, actually, that the SABC gave the ANC unfair coverage. I mean, we monitor our coverage too, and it is quite clear that the SABC gives the ANC way more coverage than it should be getting. In fact, one of the reporters who was here this week, Thandeka Qulube, specifically said that they were forced to make sure that they give the ANC more coverage than they deserved. In her written account, she said that the reports would be like a coverage, basically, of government activities. There'd be a report about the Premier opening an envelope there, followed by a minister doing this, followed by a Premier doing that. So it's an objective fact, and let's not pretend that isn't happening. But to my question now. I'm
really not going to allow us for this thing to degenerate. I am not going to allow it. Continue, ma'am.
My question. When the protest ban was announced, the SABC kind of said, it's because, people see what happens on TV, then they go out there and they do the same thing. Is there any scientific research to back that claim?
Thank you, Honourable Member. So the short answer is no. And the slightly longer answer is that if you look at the many reasons that the SABC put forward, it supports the fact that they didn't have any logical, or maybe not logical, but they didn't have any theorized reason as to why they took that decision. The fact that a significant policy was changed as a result of a press release where there was no substantiation given for that, where when they presented during the ICASA CCC hearing, they'd put forward at least 4 or 5 different explanations. So one day it was about the fact that we didn't want young people to see it and then become violent criminals. Another day it was about saying, no, it destroys the public and it gives a bad image to our country. So they kept on putting different answers for that thing, which shows that there was no coherent policy behind it. If there had been, it would be something that you could at least engage with and debate. But the reality is you had a press release, and then any number of ramblings about why they chose to do this.
Thank you so much. Honourable Chauke.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question will be, how long you have been interacting with Parliament in the position that you are holding from the position of media monitoring? Just your experience, how long it has been so far?
Personally, I think I appeared first before, one of the ones I can remember was, there was an inquiry into transformational lack thereof into advertising in the media, and that was in 2000, maybe.
Was that the last time?
No, that was not the last time, sorry. I thought you meant how long have I been doing this. I've been doing it since about 2000, on and off, depending on as and when resources allow us to come and present and when opportunities arise. I can't remember the last time offhand. I'm happy to look it up and send you the details.
Okay. So you have not lost hope on the parliamentary processes?
No, indeed. My colleagues is pointing out it was the Film and Publications Board. No, we love our democracy. We love the SABC. We have full hope and belief in the fact that as people we can overcome those that seek to undermine and destroy our democracy. Of that there's no doubt.
Yeah. Now, on that note, therefore, Chair, I'm going to encourage you to continue engaging with the Portfolio Committee of Communication, because most of the issues that we have really dealt with here today, especially on the coverage of elections and all of that, they may be best suited at the level of the Portfolio Committee, because this committee may not exist after February. So I would definitely want to encourage you there. And I think it's good that where we are seated today, if you look at the Broadcasting Act that we have, I think it's one of the most solid act of parliament that we have, because we are media monitoring Africa. So I'll take it that you don't only work in South Africa, you do work in the continent too. And if you had to compare that, you'll find that, in fact, South Africa is having the best legislation in place. Do you agree with me on that part?
Do we have significantly higher levels of media freedom? Broadly speaking, yes. Is the SABC, despite its challenges, a significantly stronger institutionally organization than many of our Southern African counterparts? Again, pretty much undoubtedly yes. Is the legislation all good? I mean, the Broadcast Amendment Bill, I know because we were involved in a lot of the debates about that. We believe one of the reasons we're here is because we gave far too much power to the minister, which has resulted in 12 CEOs in 8 years, because they answer to 2 centers of power. So I think it's a nuanced answer, but broadly speaking, I think we've got a lot to be proud of in relation to our media and policy environment in South Africa.
So my last question, obvious, is that you're happy to have met the ad hoc committee today and looking forward to engage in the future again on the parliamentary processes, okay?
Yes, and please let me be clear here. The anger that we express is not directed at the honourable members. It is in fact directed at those responsible for bringing us to this point. But we're very delighted to be sharing these insights with you.
So I'll definitely encourage you to not to lose hope, but to continue putting your point across so that the Parliament one day will listen to your point of view, because there are many points of views that are in place. Thank you very much.
Honourable Killian, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson, and I apologize that I was a little late. Can I just ask you, if I look at your last recommendations and the conclusion and the requests, I just want to start with the multi-choice deal. You are suggesting that that we should obtain information from nowhere else from multi-choice. Can you please tell us what benefit would the SABC derive from the multi-choice deal? Are you aware? What are they paying for the channel? You know, it's hardly difficult to believe that it's going free on air. What is the package multi-choice deal include? Do you have any information that could be beneficial to us?
Yes, I believe so there's the original agreement, which I believe you all have a copy of. If you don't, we'll happily furnish you with one. And then there was an amended agreement between MultiChoice and the SABC. That was, broadly speaking, or certain components of it were kept under wraps. We don't know what they were. They were revealed to the competition tribunal. But I think that deal has now been made public as well on City Press's website. I'm just looking to my colleague to confirm that. I believe it is there and free for public download, and that details the payments. The things that aren't there, of course, are the allegations around the bonuses paid to other individuals.
So what you're telling us is that we can have access to the multi-choice deal, the contract that was signed, and that we could see who signed it, etc. It's for public consumption, because we were informed by the SABC that that is sensitive and commercially sensitive information.
Yes, but I suspect, Honourable Member, the SABC has suggested any manner of things that are perhaps less than entirely true. It is there. It's available for, as I've said, we can furnish you with a copy of the, these are matters of public record. They were part of the affidavits that were submitted in the competition tribunal. The original agreement was made public, which is why we decided to kick up a big fuss about this. And the amended agreement, as I've said, I understand, has now been made available on the City Press's website as a result of their expose on Sunday. But you'll see in that agreement that it was signed by Mr. Motsoneng.
Right. I would now like to move to the findings of the 2016 election. Just first of all, you know, what they're saying about media is, for a politician to complain about the media is like a captain complaining about the storms on the sea. Sometimes they complain about the content or lack of visuals, but politicians will always complain. It also depends on the news value of some of the issues. Now, I'm just asking you, you are saying our elections is not issue-based. Well, the coverage was not issue-based, but it was rather campaign-based. Is there not something wrong with the way that we conduct elections in South Africa, that we personalize matters and actually give voters very little choice to understand what the real issues are?
Yes, we would agree with that analysis entirely. It's one of the points we've been raising for at least a decade about the manner in which all of our media, and by that I mean the community, the commercial, the privates, the public, all of them tend to cover them in the same way, which is that very often media houses allow their agenda, their elections agenda, to be determined by whatever the political parties are doing. Honourable Malema is probably one of the most astute people in the world at doing this. You know, he can create an event out of nothing and suddenly get massive media coverage for these things, which isn't to say that that isn't necessarily newsworthy, but the point, I guess, is that what our research shows again and again and again is that the issues that people are interested in learning about, how we're going to address poverty, how you're going to address high levels of crime, gender-based violence, child abuse, inequality, these critical, the land issue doesn't feature as a thing. Racism doesn't feature as an issue, and yet these are the things that drive our everyday debates and discussions, yet they don't feature as issues in elections coverage. And we do need to make a shift. And again, this is one of the reasons for anger, is those are the kind of really interesting questions that Parliament should be engaging with media on is how do we improve these things? How do political parties shift that? Because interestingly, in our report, you'll also see that we have an analysis that compares political party adverts against the coverage. So you'll see that political parties are far more astute at this than perhaps we may give them credit for sometimes as media, right? Which is that they talk about issues. So the political party adverts we analysed talked about specific issues, whereas the media coverage didn't tend to match that. And again, that's not, I mean, it's an indictment of our public broadcaster, yes, but it's equally so of our other media.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ms. Smith and Mr. Bird and everybody else, when you get invited to the old assembly or to parliament, you're entering a political terrain with a diversity of views and all sorts of things, so you must expect robustness, and I'm not saying you didn't expect it. But equally, even from our side, I think it's all right to disagree, but we shouldn't be disagreeable. We can disagree and argue. It's how we do it that becomes important. So, yeah, we might have been harsh on you, but so have we been on everybody else. And as I said earlier on, it's never personal. It's all in the interest of bettering our oversight ability as Parliament, certainly. So please don't accept that as a personal attack on media monitoring Africa. Once again, no. If, as we say to everybody else, there's anything that you think of doing between, or think of presenting to us between now and the 28th, that will assist in strengthening our report, that will assist in us being able to deflect any criticism from our final product. Please provide that to us via the office, and we will certainly, in our own engagements as a committee, consider everything, including what has come out today. Having said that, once again, thank you very much for availing yourself, and as is practice from this committee, on behalf of the committee, we wish you a Merry Christmas and we wish you a prosperous 2017, so thank you very much. Next up is going to be SOS Support Public Broadcaster. If you can give members just 3 or 4 minutes to stretch their legs while Cindy does the necessary. Honourable members, you've got 3 minutes because lunch is not far away, and we will continue with SOS Support Public Broadcaster. Thank you.
All right, well, there you have it. Just a quick break for the members to stretch their legs before they start session 3, I believe, of day 6, coming to you live from Parliament, the ad hoc committee's inquiry into the SABC. More startling revelations revealed this morning by the chair, Vincent Smith, saying that threats continue to be directed towards the so-called SABC 8 journalist. He was informed of this yesterday. We'll have more on details of that coming up. Let's take a short break. We'll resume from Parliament after this.